Okay, cool. So welcome to the latest Proteus video. We'll get into what that is in just a second, but obviously in terms of introductions, um, probably behind the name Tom Katie, the person who I have referenced the most and who has never appeared in a Proteus debate video is Steve. And I never say Steve's full name. I always just say my coach Steve, my mentor Steve. And so today we have Dr. Stephen Kalani Farias with us, who is the director of forensics at UOP, has been for almost a decade now. He was my coach back in the day. Pretty much everything I know about debate, I learned from him. Sorry, Sasan, didn't learn a whole lot when I was at DVC. We've changed the way things work at DVC now, so people do learn a lot. But anyway, Steve, how's it going?
It's going good. Thanks for having me.
It only took us like 4 years to get you on a Proteus video for the first time.
Well, the best part about it is that to this point, not only am I not on it, but now people start telling me, "Have you seen the latest Proteus video?" And then they'll tell me about something. I was like, "Yeah, I know what Paul's talking about," which is fantastic because like part of it feels like not just me coming through the video, but also at the same time everybody's juiced, and also none of them know that we look almost exactly alike when they see it. So
Yeah. And now here's the thing: Steve still has all his hair, even though he's older than me, and so he's winning in that respect. But he's also more jacked. So, with that said, aside from just being my old coach and whatnot, and a longtime member of parliamentary debate, Steve was a graduate student when he was doing his PhD at Southern Illinois University, which had some of the teams that we'll be discussing in the video today. No spoilers just yet for what that is. And with that said, I'm going to get right into it. In theory, you were and have been looking at a screen that has a spreadsheet on it. And what we're doing today is a concept that was requested by Matt Hatomi, former DVC debater, former SDSU debater. And it is what I am calling time travel gnats. And the point of time travel gnats is we have taken the 21 teams that have won the NPDA or the NPTE dating back to 2012, and we have seeded them. We have done a plan before we ever got on camera here that me and Steve have been discussing for the last week or so to set what we'll reveal shortly is a 16-team bracket of the teams we think are the 16 teams best of all time that you can see there ranked in terms of seeding. And so I want to throw a few caveats out right at the start. Number one, obviously, this is just our opinion. This isn't us speaking as like we happen to both be members of the NPTE board. This is not like the NPTE's official rankings or anything. Second thing I want to throw out is that both Steve and I have students who are on this list. And so obviously to that degree, we might be potentially biased. But the thing I do want to mention is that this is a very challenging video to make. And we actually did try and get a third person to be a part of the project. But the reality is, in order to be able to do this, you need to have watched parliamentary debate rounds since 2012, and it is currently 2024. And so the number of people who, A, have seen all of these teams that we're going to be talking about today debate, and B, would give up 2 or 3 hours on a Sunday was very slim. And so if it ends up being perceived as biased or whatever, that's cool. You go watch all the rounds yourself. In addition to this, I don't have this list put together yet, but by the time you're seeing this video, I will have put a Google Doc at the bottom of the description of the YouTube video where I'll be linking to rounds from as many of these teams as I can. So if you don't want to be spoiled on how the bracket goes or whatever, if you want to make your own opinion and be able to make an opinion, and you want homework for whatever reason, you can watch those videos to make up your mind about just about all of these teams. I think there's only maybe 1 or 2 teams who will not have videos available from. So just wanted to make that note for everyone. And with that said, let's get into it. As you can see here, we have the 21 teams ranked and seeded. And I'll tell you, the way we did this basically was I put together a list of the 21 teams, and I sent it to Steve, and then I had my own copy of the list, and completely independently from each other, we ranked all of the teams. And we had disagreements about the rankings and whatnot, but essentially we used the composite score, the average score of Steve's rankings and my rankings to land at the seeds that you see here. With that said, we had to get down to 16 somehow, unless we wanted to add 3 teams that didn't win nationals to get to 24 or to get to like 32 or something. And so the way we did that was twofold. Number one, and I'm just going to be completely honest with you, we forgot about PAB BC. I just didn't put them on the list that I sent to Steve. And the spoilers, they weren't going to make the top 16 anyway, in my opinion, just yet. They've still got a lot of time. They're sophomores. But as a result, we just immediately crossed them out because 21 made it weird. There would have been an automatic bye. It would have been strange in terms of how we would have had to set up the bracket. Second thing is we took the remaining bottom 8 teams and we hypothetically discussed how those debates would go. And so we're going to start from there. The teams that are bolded that you can see are the teams that won those hypothetical debates in our mind. And it just happens to be a coincidence that in this instance, all of the lowest seeds did win their debate. But we're going to just break this down kind of one by one, starting with the first debate, which is Lewis and Clark CH, the 2014 NPTE National Champions, against William Jewell HJ, the 2016 NPTA National Champions. And so, Steve, we both agreed here. How did you come to your decision in this debate? Because in something I want to note, before I finish talking even longer, one of the big reasons that I wanted Steve around was there's about 3 teams on this list who I've seen debate 3 times, like 3 times through 4 times maybe, right, based on videos and stuff, because I wasn't around for it. But Steve was coaching the best team in the country when this was happening and was very much around for it, had teams kind of in the game, and so he potentially has a little more insight on some of those older teams than I would on the newer teams. So sorry again. Go ahead, Steve.
No, it's totally fine. And I think before I start, I think one other key part is that while you're watching this, Paul and I were not basing it based on just the career, but these debaters and these debate teams at their like peak. And that's a really important thing, right? Like as you'll see, I think Lewis and Clark, McKay and Emily, not just their run at NPTE, but their ability to be multimodal in debate at a time when for a lot of teams, there was, like, for those of you that are privy to Parley today, being able to read framework and go for framework in a debate is almost essential to being a top tier parliamentary debate team. But back in 2014, 2015, reading framework against a critical AF wasn't necessarily something you did. You read T, you might read another criticism. And so what Emily and McKay were able to do was not only read their critical affirmative hip hop feminism consistently beating back topicality, but as they showed in finals, they were able to just go with a straight up AF against Whitman. And I think Logan and Martin were 2 of the best debaters at that time. If we had a bracket of debaters who didn't win a national championship, I'm sure Martin King makes the list.
Martin might be number 1 all time, did not win nationals debate. But yeah.
It's nasty. But I think that's also proof of why I had them over Jewell, because although I think that Jewell team was excellent, the tournament they won NPDA, I always like to call it the People's Tournament versus NPTE. And the ability for, in terms of technical debate, to see that now, I think Emily and McKay were far ahead of that Jewell team. And so I think that's where I landed on it, was watching, just thinking about, okay, if they read hip hop feminism, what could they do? If they had a panel where they couldn't be critical, what would they do today? And then I think that was the hard part about Jewell, was not that they had hard and fast rules, but especially with them and then following up that team, the Jewell program was not very critical, was not very technical, but man, they could debate the impact debate better than just about anybody else. But I think that's plays into Lewis and Clark's hand. Their ability to get to the internal link debate, get to the core question of the debate, was much better for them than I think Jewell in this matchup.
This comes down to like 5 things for me, so I'm just going to go through them. Number 1, the field that Lewis and Clark competed in at that NPTE. Obviously, it was NPTE, so it's limited in terms of, it's 32 teams, or I think it's 32 teams that year, if I'm not wrong. But the field of debate was 300. Teams essentially in debate at that time in terms of NPA. And so it's an awesome field. It's a field that has Martin King, who me and Steve already mentioned, maybe the best debater ever to not win nationals. It had Josh Rivera in it, and not super young Josh Rivera. This is junior year Josh Rivera, so he already has 3 national championships at this point. No, is this before NPDA that year?
Yeah, because NPTE happens before. I'm almost positive it happens before NPDA this year.
You might be right about that. Well, it's just a week later he's gonna have.
Yeah.
So he's absolutely cracked. So the strength of people that they beat was really compelling. So let's go to the Jewell one. I was at this nationals and I debated this Jewell team, and I don't want to. First off, and this is another thing we kind of haven't mentioned yet, but like this is literally a list of the greatest teams of all time. Like the entire point of this list is who's the best team of all time. The worst team on this list still has a national championship. Yep. And so when we make notes, it's in the context of that, right? Like when you're analyzing the NBA, like yes, any NBA player is better than 99.999% of the world, but compared to LeBron, they're dog shit. And so with that said, I debated against this Jewell team my first semester at Pacific at Mile High in an elim and won. And I think of how bad I was my first semester at Pacific, and I'm like, all right, well, like clearly they could lose to bad teams, which hurts them in my mind. Secondarily, I don't know whether I give them significant credit or not for how they got to the final round, because the context here is this is the Jewell team that ended the UT Tyler CH team's chances of winning double nationals, because UT Tyler said the F word in the LOR and they read in the PMR an F word bad K and won on a 2-1 decision. And then when they go to finals, they debated SIU, Bobby and Ariel. And this is famously the year where after this, they had to add a time limit to how many thank yous you get, because Ariel gave 20 minutes of crying thank yous and then they got smashed, right? And so I felt like they miracled their way into this final round. They didn't beat an especially good team in the other round. They didn't do fantastic at the other nationals that year. And so while nationals was still pretty big then, I think there were 216 teams at NPDA that year. This team never stood out to me as like supremely dominant in any way. We were going to Mile High. They weren't in finals there. They weren't winning a lot of the big tournaments. You weren't seeing them in elims and things like Long Beach and whatnot. And so, again, a national champion team, but certainly one of the lower ones for me. And so me and Steve ended up going Lewis and Clark here. Anything else on this matchup, Steve, or do you want to keep going on?
No, we can go on.
Cool. Let's get to SIU RS 2015 against Rice TR. This is one of the gaps me and Steve had in terms of our rankings of the individual team. So in case I didn't explicitly mention it, Steve coached Josh Rivera. So Steve was there when Josh was a freshman. I think through sophomore year, you were still there, right?
Through his junior year.
Through his junior year. And so Steve coached Josh Rivera, and Steve, as we're going to find out, is a big SIU fan because Josh Rivera is one of the best debaters of all time. It's hard to not have his partnerships ranked pretty high. But with that said, this is Josh Rivera's senior year with Zach Schneider, his senior year. And this is a team that this year they make finals of NPDA and NPTE. The knock against them is that they end up losing NPDA on a 4-3 to the KCKCC team, the only community college team to ever win nationals. Then on the other side, at NPTE, they beat Sam and Steven their junior year in a very good round. There used to be video of it online, but now that Debate Vids is gone, it's kind of there. So this is the best, most people think, the GOAT, the best parlay debater of all time. At the height of his powers, the end of his career, with another senior who they can clearly, I think they almost beat the record that Mike and Josh set 2 years before for highest win percentage ever in a single season. So this is like a legit super crack team going against who I think, and me and Steve had a disagreement here, barely by one ranking, who I think is the worst team to ever win nationals in Rice TR. I've mentioned this, I think, before, but I think it's insane that they were even allowed to advance on a 4-4. They didn't have a winning record at nationals, and I've talked to Brittany about why they advanced and all this stuff, and her reasoning was Harley was dying and I wanted to advance more teams, and then it just so happened that they went on this crazy run, and it was a legit crazy run, but, not like they were in finals of the other half. They just miracled into this one. And to be fair, on top of the context of them being 4-4, in their 8th round, since they thought they had it broke, instead of debating seriously, they just said they did thank yous. They read their thank yous because one of them was a senior. And then they just said, give us 30 speaks or whatever, right? And I've talked to the judge of this round, and they're like, yeah, I just thought, whatever, they're seniors. This round doesn't matter for anyone, so I voted for them. And that let them break because not only were they 4-4 now, but they both just got 30s. So that bumped up their position. And so it shouldn't happen. This is like the planets had to align just perfectly. And obviously, that's not to say there's not good debaters. Jacob and Max. I mean, Max has been in finals since then, and had a very good career since then. For the 2 consecutive years since then. But for me, really, it's not close here. You have the best debater of all time, according to most people, against the worst team to ever win nationals, in my opinion. So, what did you have a different breakdown of this, Steve, or what do you think?
No, I mean, it's not too different. I think, especially as the person who was coaching the team on the other side of those thank yous, who was 4-3. And so the judge saying it didn't matter was wild. But I think that the hard part about this too is though that the field, even though it was smaller for Rice TR, I think is still in Elam's an excellent field, right? You still have
the run was cracked in Elam's,
multiple national champions in the field. And national champion teams in the field. So it's not just like, oh, it's like Josh is debating with Sid Rigg like he did his freshman year. It's like, no. There are full-on teams that will go on to win nationals. So knowing that part of their nationals run is really important. But at the same time, we'll get into this, I'm sure, when we get into the bracket. But Zach and Josh, I think, some people, and I think this happens a lot, we'll see this with, I think, Berkeley a lot too, is that whoever Josh is paired with often gets kind of looked over because Josh was just so good. Although 2 years after this, I'll never forget a Point Loma round where somebody was, I don't give an F about somebody from Michigan, when Point Loma was using Josh as an example of people who go on to do policy stuff after debate. But so it was pretty funny to know the kind of like how memory goes away. But Josh is so good, and this is sometimes we overlook Zach. I don't know that either Max or Jacob at this point could rise to the level of Zach, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zach kind of dog walks him.
So I think that's the other part about this, is that I think Max is really good, especially, and became excellent. But again, this is like Zach after having been, I think it was at Cedarville right before coming to SIU. This is Zach after he's been told he can't just read 4 theory arguments and a disad, and he's working to build into a stronger performance in terms of what he can and can't read on the NA, what he can and can't read on the AF, and then Josh. So yeah, there was no hesitation for me about this matchup.
Yeah. Okay, so that brings us to Washburn BS, which is Quentin and Will against KCC, which was Matt and Anthony. And this one is a little tough for me because I have seen exactly one round KCC debate ever. And it was cool, but the context of them winning is very much that, like, it was kind of right time, right place. They were doing their, like, performance. I don't know if you want to call it a project or not, but they were reading K, performance. Zach had the dumbest cross-ex answer of all time, and it was just doomed from there. And I've watched this debate a lot. I kind of think that Josh just, like, bodied them. And it was surprising to me that they lost in the end. With that said, on the other side, I originally in the matchup of my bracket had Washburn BS winning this debate. I debated Washburn BS a number of times. So actually, the team that eliminated us our junior year. And I think that there's a problem here, matchup-wise, for KCC in my mind, but ultimately was swayed by Steve. But in my opinion, the thing was this. Quentin, who was a black debater, and would read a lot of like anti-blackness related positions, right? And would read hip-hop and things like that. And I just don't think KCC gets like the same sort of like cultural cachet, it's of the moment, blah, 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 against someone who is so ready to have that exact debate, right? Because when I think about this, it's like, okay, well, SIU read a straight up app and KCC read the K on the negative. It's like, what were they going to do if they read hip hop on the app? What were they going to do if they read anti-blackness on the app? And like, I mean, obviously, again, I don't have the context of these other rounds, but I know that Quentin, in my opinion, especially, was particularly legit at that time, and had a number of big wins. And to me, I just wasn't super impressed by the KCC, despite how cool it was, like debate thing in general. I think they very much won the moment. So, what about you, Steve?
I think this is where. We'll use this analogy again. Styles make fights, right? I think the hard part for me in trying to put Will and Quentin above KCKCC was, well, I like Quentin, and I think Will, when he was in his bag, was in a good spot. What KCKCC could do coming from policy was be able to debate in terms of implied clash on, let's say that BS did read Black hip hop feminism, right? KCKCC would read hands up, don't shoot. And I think this is the other part is KCKCC, and I will stand by this, turned critical debate and parliamentary debate from kids read things that seem cool that they worked on a weekend, and turned it into, you got to do your reading. And I know that sounds pedantic, but truly KCKCC's argument was based in literature, was based, and it happens right around the time of Black Lives Matter starting as a movement right there in Ferguson and being a big part of that conversation, I think. And so that ties into that that milieu that Paul's talking about. But I also just think that Will was not technically great in terms of like his ability to do tech. Neither was KCKCC, in my opinion, in parliamentary debate. And I think this is often overlooked. It's hard to come from policy into parliamentary debate where there's not evidence that the judge gets to watch with you. There's not the ability to follow along with that. And I think on top of it, there's more time, right? And in policy debate, there's always more time to get back to what's most important. So I thought KCKC did a really good job of knowing what their argument was, watching them at that nationals, having to coach my teams against that argument. I remember walking up to Matt and Anthony after a round one time, just being like, why aren't people who are white just standing up and saying, yeah, I'm white, I got to use access to the systems that I have access to? Because that's based in literature, not about whiteness, but about how privilege and access to systems of power operate. And I'm in my doctoral program at the time. And so I'm like, well, we've been reading this in class. What would you say to that? And Matt was like, yeah, I wish people would say that argument instead of just going T, or you have to talk about policy. And I think that was the thing about Washburn BS, is that they are good in their bag. But if somebody else was in their bag or trying to argue the things that they were arguing, as evidenced by the semifinal round that we lose against them in MPDA, where they go on to win their national championship, I don't know that Will's really great at answering that. And that's where it came down to me, is that if I were to think about the four debaters in this round, what's the debate going to be? It's probably going to be hands up, don't shoot versus whatever AF or NAG Washburn chooses to read. I think KCKCC is ahead on that game. And then the question is, can Will tech his way into a win, or that team's way into a win? Because I believe Quentin was both yellow and the PM. And in that world, I just don't think that's possible, given how good KCKCC was at their argument. And so that's why I think that was my primary argument to Paul. It's just, I think that there's a lot that goes into that team showing up to nationals, being sophomores, just kind of saying, you know what, we're going to see what happens. Because this KCKCC team goes on and doesn't even break at Phi Rho Pi, if I remember correctly, in policy, because their arguments weren't going to fly with certain judging pools. So that's another part to it, which is that, well, Washburn, for their ability to debate in parley, was excellent. This KCKCC team, I think, in terms of that matchup, is excellent against Washburn BS. So, you know, if they're debating, I thought it would have been funny if we'd have put them at 19 and just seen what happens. But if they're debating SIU RS there, then they already have that win, right? And I think that that's the question. What styles make what fights?
Well, and I think that the last thing I'll say is that when it comes to like videos I show my students, like not my actual like forensic students, but just like my COM 123 like argumentation debate students, I show the KCKCC stuff all the time. Because it's so cool. I just don't know that in the context of this list, it was fantastic. But they make it through, so whatever. And then the last one was Mercer BB against Mckendry DP. And so this is Kyle and Jazz against Mitch and Adasia. And in the end, we ended up going with Mckendry DP. If I'm not wrong, I had Mercer winning the first time I saw this. My thought process basically came down to, I think that in this round, if I'm like ranking the debaters on like a skill level kind of situation, basically, I think Mitch was probably the bottom of that list between all four of these people for different reasons. And that's not to say that, I mean, Mitch made finals next year. So like, again, when you're talking about the greatest people of all time, but this is a year where Mercer wins one natty and is in finals of the other one against Berkeley. and has a close debate on framework when they're debating Henry and Brian. But basically, for me, I felt that like stylistically, this was another one of those sort of problem matchups because I think that a lot of Mckendry DP's strength at this time again was sort of like the K debate revolving around concepts of things like blackness and whatnot. I don't want to speak to any specific kind of literature and whatnot because I know there's been kind of things about this year in terms of like people saying Adasia said things Adasia didn't say, which is not cool. But Mercer is 100% reading their similar like K performance type stuff. Like when we debated them this year at nationals, they were reading like poems. And I think that Jazz was a sufficiently technical sort of like MG and whatnot for Mercer, and that Kyle was just like an ultra persuasive rebuttalist. And I think that in that world, even if I think that potentially Deja's the best debater maybe in the round, I think overall it flows Mercer for me. So what got Mckendry across the board for you?
Well, I think this is again a good point to make, which is, so if we look at first, Jazz is crushing it. I think Jazz and Adasia are the top two debaters in this pairing easily. But I think that this also is kind of where I look at having been in that kind of moment, but then also looking at who these folks are now, right? Like Adasia and Kyle are two of the best coaches in the nation. So it's hard to separate sometimes who they were as debaters versus who they are now or who they've grown into. And I think for me, this used to be a common part of watching Kyle and Jazz debate, which was Kyle would always be accused of not answering the flow. And now as a judge, it's funny, I think Kyle's probably one of the best ones, even though he may not be flowing the way that people want you to appear to be flowing, he retains information that happens in the debate all the time in a way where we're talking after debates. I'm like, how is this? Yeah. How they arrived at this decision? I was like, I don't know. Here's three things that they didn't answer. So, but as a debater, one of the things that was consistent was it was like, well, we're winning this on the flow. We're winning this on the flow. We're winning this on the flow. But Kyle was just so good at being able to say those arguments don't matter, and here's why. I think that doesn't work though against Adasia and Mitch because, I think I'm on the bottom of a 5-2 in this MPDA final round. So I voted for Lewis and Clark. But sometimes there are just teams that win your ballot. We'll talk about that when we get to Ryan and Amanda. I don't know that I ever didn't vote for them. But the bigger point I'm making is that I think watching Adasia and seeing how well her and Mitch work together to understand the crux of the debate. And then also, I think this comes into the thing that mattered to me about this Mckendry team. Mckendry was always excellent at figuring out the question of the debate. They didn't always have the most technically proficient debaters, right? Like Ian and Ben, when they were in finals, they were good, but they were never that team that made you scared when you were coaching against them. I mean, Corey Freivogel was fantastic, but notoriously was always way better than his partner. And even Brent and forgetting his name. What was Brent's partner when they read the Hedge K? He'll get on me about this, but they were always really good at figuring out the impact debate. And this is where I think that Mckendry team is better than the Mercer team, is that while Jazz is technically proficient, I don't think Jazz is as technically proficient as Adasia and Mitch together. Yeah. And I thought that Adasia and Mitch were excellent at going, okay, here's the core argument of this debate. Here's how we're winning access to it. And again, this comes back to, I think, a philosophy for a lot of these matchups. Kyle would not have been able, in my opinion, to come back around and go, well, these arguments don't matter because, and then go for their poetry and their Baudrillard style arguments. And I think that really makes a big difference in the way that Mckendry is able to adapt to this Mercer team, because I don't think a lot of teams at the time Mercer won were able to adapt in that way. We're able to figure out, okay, the flow we're not talking about a logocentric model of debate. We're talking about what is the core arguments that we're going to go for, and how are those persuasive, or how are those interacting with not necessarily the line by line, but the thesis of the negative or the thesis of the affirmative. I think Mckendry DP was excellent at that. It's one of the things that they were able to do effectively when they were critical on the affirmative, and something that they did excellent on theory. So that's the part where I think their, again, multimodal approach makes it hard for Mercer to overcome it, in my opinion.
I think that something I hadn't really considered in the moment was, I also think Mckendry's prep room is a million times better at this tournament. Like, yeah. Mckendry this year has Brent and Zach in the prep room, and Mercer, as far as I'm aware, has facility. And I don't know how much facility was doing, given that Jazz and Kyle were kind of reading their stuff. And so I think that's a good thing to consider, and that Zach, in my opinion, was a very good prep out coach. And so to that degree, I can see it. So that settles our plan, which resulted in the 16 seeds that you see in this right side table with all the teams color coded, all cute, because I did that for you. And so that brings us to the bracket. And so this is the part me and Steve have not done together yet. So individually, we have both done our own bracket to say what we think the matchups would play out as. And so the plan is for us to just discuss for you how we think each matchup plays out, kind of give you the context of the teams in that year. Now, something I want to note is that we had some kind of like, I don't know if I'd call it waffling, but basically when we were discussing it, where we landed at was you get the debaters in the moment, right? And so when we're comparing the two SIU RS teams, like one has more future Josh versus slightly less future Josh or whatever, right? And as a result, there's some things that kind of change in our opinions and whatnot. But getting into the first matchup, it's the 1 seed against the 16 seed. And I'll just tell you spoilers now. Me and Steve both had SIU RS, the 2013 version, with Mike Self and Josh Rivera as the 1 seed in this tournament. And I think this is a face crush. Like, to me, this is just a face crush. Like, if I thought that Josh and Zach won when they did it, I can't see Mike having the same issue that, well, actually technically in this case, because this is when Josh was PM and Mike was MG. I can't see Josh Rivera in the first speech having that moment that Zach did and putting them behind the 8 ball. Even if that did happen, Mike was cracked. Mike Selk was cracked super fast. And like the thing that's hard to explain to people if they just haven't watched the rounds. And I encourage you, I'm gonna have a million of these rounds because I've seen every Mike and Josh round that ever existed on tape. The thing you have to understand is, like, Mike was probably the fastest debater in the country, and Josh was up there himself. But my God, could they slow down? My God, was the clarity ridiculous? And I just think it's no shot in this round. I think that they're easily the 2 best debaters in this round, and I think that they're so ready for this to happen. And the prep room at this time is Todd Graham, Steve, Kyle Cheesewright, and Kevin Calderwood. And like, I just don't see it going anyway but SIU RS. So Steve, I mean, like, was it just that simple for you, or like, is there any? Given that you saw both of these teams more than I did, thoughts?
I'll say that there was some hesitation. Not that I don't. I think Mike and Josh advanced, but I don't. This is the hard part of that KCC team. Was Sohail is in that prep room. So is Scott. So the prep room is actually really good at trying to figure out debate. They're just brilliant debate minds. I think that here is the difference in kind of age and also in terms of adaptability. And what I mean by that is, so when we think about Mike, you can watch a lot of rounds with Mike and Josh, but what people don't understand is that Mike was the first debater in the MPTE. This is back when MPTE was 300 teams large, or ranking a bunch of teams, to finish in the top 10 at the tournament every year of his career from freshman until senior. This is also really important, I think. A lot of times when we talk about Mike, it's in the context of with Josh, or maybe even with Ben, as we'll talk about with SIU CR, not CS. But I think one of the key things here is that Mike made it to top 10 with Richard Flores his freshman year, a random person who was debating at UT San Antonio. This was after he debated with Jeff Jones his freshman year. So, you know, there was Jeff Jones, Richard Flores, top 10. Okay, fine. Then that next year, he's in semis with Brandon Merrill of the MPTE. I'm on the bottom of a 6-1 in that debate, voting for SIU, but also the only one who's voting on the uniqueness to a link turn. And a lot of Pacific Northwest folks who don't have love for SIU and are not fans of Todd and are not fans of the program are on that panel. And so they lose that panel as well. But then this is consistent, is that Mike is into deep elims at the NPTE. So by the time his senior year had arrived, one of the big conversations we had was, one, trying to remove some of the anxiousness, but two, letting Mike debate in a way that made him feel comfortable. Because a lot of times at SIU, we had a lot of guidelines on what we were to do, what we weren't to do. And so if you ever watch the semifinal round between SIU RS and Whitman KW, that debate, I think, is the epitome of where Mike had come in terms of his ability to not let the round get to him, his ability to let things kind of go or shirk off. I think that was part of the KCC problem, is that Zach was not ready for the anxiety that would come with being in front of a big crowd, would come with that moment, because it's the first time Zach's been deep into the NPTE, really. In terms of that, or in terms NPDA, but has been deep into nationals at that point. And I think that matters a lot, in that, you know, the argument hands up, don't shoot is a hard argument to answer. It's one that Josh would have been ready for. It's one that Josh, as a freshman, basically wanted to read. He kept calling it Africana existentialism. And we told him we didn't think Parley was quite ready for him to be talking about lynching white people. So those are the context with why I thought SIU RS would win this debate. But it gave me pause, because it is a hard matchup. It is not an easy argument to overcome. It is not one that I thought they didn't have. They had an extensive prep room advantage. Like, I think both prep rooms are pretty good. So I think our SIU RS wins this, but it wasn't, okay, yeah, there's no shot. And I think that's just because it's this SIU, it's this Mike Selk, and Josh is already cracked at this point.
There's a round at NPTE this year where Mike and Josh debate Brandon Rivera and gosh, I can't remember her name right now. Can't
Alyssa?
Melissa.
That, yeah.
Yes.
No, it's Alyssa.
Like,
Alyssa.
with Alyssa. Sorry, when they were writing on themselves and whatnot, and like they had this whole that's like debate's bad because it's racist, and you know, all these kinds of things. And in the modern day, what would happen if you read that is someone would come up and read Long Fuck Dream, right? Like 2020, 2018 onward, basically, that's what would happen. And Mike and Josh do not do that. They come up and they're like, you're just rescaffolding the plantation. You want to save debate, and that's bad. You just have like this K versus K round with them. They just murk them on. And so I see more of that happening here. But yeah, so me and Steve are in agreement here. SIU RS ends up advancing. Which brings us to, do you want to go to the other side of the bracket, Steve, or do you want to keep going on the left side all the way, or what do you think?
I mean, go to the other side of the bracket, because we could do one side of the bracket consistently, but I think that if we go back and forth, it'll help us just going through the matchups.
Cool. So here we have the 2 seed, UTTCH, which is Sam and Steven against Mckendry DP, which, as we mentioned earlier, was Deja and Mitch. And this, for me, is another virtually impossible to lose round. I think that there's a lot of context to this. Number one, this UTT team is winning nationals when they win the NPTE over Washburn BK, when nationals is still pretty big. I think, as I mentioned, in PDA that year, I believe had 216 teams at it. And UT Tyler pretty much stomps their way through the NPTE, and they at NPDA are crushing everyone's face as well, but then they ultimately end up losing to Jewell on the F4K, which, you know, I guess it is what it is. They lost the round, but it's like, you're right. They lost the round to an argument they didn't get to respond to. And so what can you do about it? I think that Sam is such a better rebuttalist than almost anyone in this entire tournament. And if you weren't there, you just can't picture the like magic that this dude had around him when he was competing. Because you would see in the rare instances where they'd be behind, or later when Sam was a senior, they could be just unbelievably behind against like the other best teams in the country. And Sam came up in a debate that was impossible to win and won it, and did it so casually. I remember at Long Beach that year, I think I've told this before, I'm sure, on Proteus, but like at Long Beach that year in finals, there was a thing where like basically Sam had a flight that was like right after when the round was supposed to end. And the way this round happens is everyone's in the room. Sam comes in the room with a piece of paper, walks up to the podium, and just starts going. Like, doesn't wait for like everyone else. The second the debate ends, he walks out of the room and never comes back. And it's just like a 3-0 smash, right? I mean, and this was against Allison Escalante, right? Who was a fantastic debater. And it's like, they beat everyone on everything that year. And they published their disclosure. So they said all year long, they told people what they read, what their opponent read, what they collapsed to, and what the debate was won on. And so they're giving away information. No one does this in Parliament. It's never been done really before or since, as far as I'm aware of. Maybe Steve knows more about that. But when you read that disclosure doc, UT Tyler lost 2 rounds. And this is before nationals. And both rounds were on Kondo. And then otherwise, they lost to the F-word K. And that's it. In like an entire year. And when they lost one of those rounds, they lost it to, I think, Ariel and Bobby on Kondo at nationals. And I just don't know that Mckendry's whipping out Kondo. And I don't know that outside of that, they would have a shot against this team if they were the negative. And on the AF, with Sam giving 2 speeches and I think Steven being one of the best MGs of all time, I just think this is a bridge too far for me.
Yeah, I didn't think too long about this, if for no other reason than, once again, I think Sam is not only a magician, but peek behind the curtains. So at SIU, we used to get a beach house at Point Loma every year. And Sam was at UTT with Chuck, and I think Caitlin was his partner that freshman year. Caitlin Bull, Washburn BK, Caitlin Bull. And everyone's got issues with Chuck. If you don't know Chuck Waltz, you might be better off. And don't ever go knocking on his door. He'll answer with a gun. He lives in Texas. He coaches girls speech debate. So the whole reason I bring that up, though, is we're sitting at that beach house. Chuck used to coach for Todd at SIU for a while. So he was talking to me, and we were talking. And then I saw Sam and Caitlin. I was just talking to them about their tournament. And Portland was a hard tournament. Or at the time, it was one of the hardest tournaments because you had a really good national field, but you did not have the national judging that you would want for a national field. So a lot of times you would find that you had to maneuver around the type of minefield you might find yourself in dubs or trips in MPDA. So it was really good prep for that. And UT Tyler had lost early in elims. And so I see Sam and Caitlin there. I'm talking to Sam. And Sam unabashedly told me he would be the best debater in the history of parliamentary debate. And at the time, I was kind of like, well, okay, I'm watching Josh. I kind of know what that looks like already. But so to see like what Sam would do from that freshman year to this, and then also to watch and know that his ability not just to explain the internal link debate, but to make magic out of arguments that the other team made. I'll always remember there was a round at this nationals against Oregon, and Sam and Allie are just going back and forth in flex
so sick,
about
so
who had said the argument about anti-blackness. Was it Wilderson or was it Fanon? And I'm sitting there judging this, being like, I don't know that there's a better example of critical debate and parliamentary debate about the way that you could be critical on the affirmative while still being topical, about the way that you could read anti-blackness on the negative and engage with the critical. It was just perfect. But then to watch both that moment of Sam going, okay, cool, we're gonna res up real quick, and then to deliver a rebuttal that was unconscionably great. I think that is the hard, that's why I didn't have a second thought. It's that Sam is that good. I think Steven's excellent, don't get me wrong, but I think that makes all the difference in this debate because, again, if we come back to Mitch and Adeja, Adeja's fantastic. Mitch is really good, but Mitch is not out teching anybody in this debate, and Sam's might be the best res up rebuttalist I've ever seen.
He has, I think, the best, almost every instance of the best cross-exs I've ever seen with Sam Cook.
Yeah.
That round is the best round I've ever seen in my life. The one you're talking about, and the fact there's no video is a crime.
No, I agree. I mean, it's about returning artifacts, right?
Yeah.
And so but even the conversation about who do you return it to, how is a return, what does the F look like,
and they had this whole thing. It was like a metaphor of like a museum curator and all.
Right,
this.
exactly, and it was, and later on, I'm watching a similar kind of concept from Western Kentucky at Lincoln Douglas debate, where they put policies or things like that in a museum. But this is all part and parcel with the Sam was, and again, peek behind the curtain. Sam was a father of 2 or 3 at this time. He's working 40 hours a week, and he's like, I just really want to be good at debate, and I want to teach my children how to be good at debate, and I want them to think critically. From where I come from, that's not common. So it's hard to look at that and then go, again, when I think about Mike or I think about Sam in these moments, these are people who have like, this is what I want. This is what I've dedicated the last 3 years of my life to, and I will not be denied in this moment.
Yeah, they were crazy. They're such a good team. So next up, that brings us to PAB KT, which is Tom Katie and Henry Tolcher against SIU CR, which is Ben Campbell and Josh Rivera. So this is Josh Rivera's junior year. So this is one where me and Steve haven't had this discussion yet in terms of like hashing it out or whatever, but we disagree in our individual brackets. So my position was that PAB KT, I think, takes this. I think PAB KT is the most technical team of all time. I think in a line-by-line era, this team was just cracked. They were both so fast. Tom Katie is the best debater of my generation, unless you count Sam Cook as being from my generation. And Tom was unbelievably good at breaking down the debate and figuring out what mattered and whatnot. And they, Tom was just like one of the best MGs of all time. And this year, because Henry is so fast, he's the MG. Like Tom Katie, one of the best MGs I ever saw, was like, yeah, I'll have you do the MG, right? Like, no problem. There's this video, it's actually gone now, but I might have a copy of it, of Lila and Cam debating Henry and Tom in the finals of GGI. And it's like Henry in a debate that was already so big, it's just like new sheet. Like it's just more. Like they just could overwhelm these teams. It was insane. And then at the same time, on the negative, Henry basically invented the way that the LOR is done now in parliamentary debates, something that we've talked about a bit, Steve, with the layers and preamp stuff, and the like new sheet thing. That wasn't a thing, dude. The new sheet thing was Henry Tolcher, you know? And so for me, this team is absolutely cracked in that sense. Now, with that said, Josh Rivera, again, one of the best debaters of all time. I think this is one of those teams that I mentioned to you ahead of time. I don't have enough data. There are 2 videos, as far as I'm aware. 3 videos on the entire internet of Ben Campbell debating with Josh Rivera. There's the finals round against Ryan Kelly and Ian from Washburn. There is Elam 4 or Elam 5 of the NPDA against a different Washburn team. And then there's a video of them in finals, I think against Lewis and Clark or Jewell of GGI from that same year. And I was never super impressed by Ben. I just thought he was big. I thought he'd give a great big, like, you know, rebuttal kind of situation. I thought it was kind of funny. And it seemed like he was very smart for the few times I saw him judge me as opposed to compete. But I did not think that works that great against a team that is this fast, that is this technical. And that goes for everything. Like, this is, I mean, they went for everything all the time. Did not need to collapse. Was not a problem for them. They were just so clear. Now, the knock I have against PAB KT is that they debated in a relatively weak era, admittedly, and they weren't the dominant team that year until nationals. Yeah. Ficker and Max were actually like ranked higher than them and were consistently doing good against them. But in the end, I thought that this team was crazy good. They were so good. It just felt like a wall to have to debate them because there was, you know, we talked about this in like video games, but like certain raids in like World of Warcraft, it doesn't even matter how good you are. There is a stat check. Like, do you even have the equipment that is like mathematically possible to beat this team? And I think this team might have one of the highest barriers of all time for you to have a shot against them. But once you pass that barrier, they're not very beatable, but they're beatable, to say something, right? Like, I don't think an average team can beat them at all. I don't think you can luck into a win against this team. I think you just have to be really good. And so, what's your take on why you went with CR over KT?
So I think this. I'll come back to the Henry is the perfect example of somebody that I think, for me, I probably overlooked more than I should, just because I remember him at Santa Rosa, and then I also know his partners. And if you look at this, I don't think anyone looks at this and goes, Henry's better than Tom. Henry's better than Brian. Henry's excellent. I mean, statistically one of the best debaters of all time. Yeah. So I don't want to take anything away from Henry, but I think this is really important. The same thing can be said about Ben. So Ben's freshman year, he doesn't get to compete because doesn't have a partner. Again, Jeff Jones tries to rob a bank with a sandwich. And so it leads to it just being Mike and Brandon. And then his sophomore year, he's debating with Mike. And they make it pretty deep at both nationals. But so by the time he is a senior and Josh is a junior, the thing that happens in between is so there are two parts to this that are really important. He now has to carry Sid Rigg. Now, nobody knows who Sid is except some of the Midwest folks who might watch this. Shout out Brent Nicholson. But Sid is somebody who just came back from being a human being selling cars. And I was like, well, I want to finish my degree, so I'm going to come back and do debate. And Josh and Sid make it to semis, lose to Adam and Joey, Josh's freshman year at the MPTE, when Josh is spreading and talking about
Adam Testament and Joey Donahue, just for
sorry. Adam Testament and Joey Donahue. But I mean, it's a round where 30 minutes after the decision, which is a 3-2, Joseph Evans comes out and he's like, you know what? I think I probably made the wrong decision. I'm like, don't say this now. Do not say this to me now, right? So Sid could have made it to finals that first year. And then that next year, him and Ben are in semis and lose to Robert and I can't remember.
Zach
no, it wasn't Robert and Zach. It's Robert at Texas Tech. And they lose in maybe not center. They lose in semis because MPDA is at Pacific that year. And I know they lose in semis. And I think it's to Texas Tech. But again, like that. So and nobody would watch this video who's ever seen Sid Rigg debate and go, Sid was the best debater on. He's not. Okay, so Ben was excellent, but Ben was excellent when he didn't have to be the rebuttalist. And so one of the reasons I think it's really important is this national championship, I think we did 6 rounds of MPDA day one, because we used to have to do a bunch, each day at least 6. So 6 rounds. After day one, I think they're 4-2. And we're sitting in the prep room and Todd just looks at them both and goes, you're switching speaker positions now. And just middle of the national tournament, the last shot that Ben has to win a national championship, he says, hey, instead of being the PM, you will now be the MG. And instead of being the LO, you will now be the MO. Or, he'll be double member. First, the look of relief on Josh's face makes me laugh to this day. Josh is like, yes, I don't have to do anything. And it's funny because that was Josh's best spot. He was always the better PMR. Now, because of his speed, because of his ability to hang, and his ability to spread people out of the debate, Josh would always be an excellent MG. But that's the thing about Ben is when Ben was on a script, and this is a similar thing that we'll talk about with Berkeley Debate, Henry might be one of the few debaters I don't think he used a script as much. He was still developing the layers and preamps and all that stuff in the single page. But Ben on a script, Ben's ability to answer and just be efficient. If you see those debates where Ben's an MG, his MG is actually technically quick and good at getting to the point of the debate. In quarters, when they debate Washburn, Ben's MG wins the debate to the point where Josh at the end of the PMR, I believe, is just like, I'm not sure what else I have to go for now. I've won everything that Ben gave me. So that's why I pick Ben and Josh, is because Josh, as a rebuttalist, as one of the best debaters of all time in parliamentary debate, excellent, and Ben's excellent as an MG. I think the thing that gets me here is as you're talking about it, is KT's ability to read new sheets, things like that. Theory is not an issue for SIU, the way that theory can be for a lot of folks, right? I think this is the other part about the way that Josh would approach theory versus the way that like most people would always think about. Josh's approach to theory in any rebuttal would always be, let's get to the impact debate. What does it actually matter? So when you talk about this whole like debates bad part, Josh was the first person I ever saw to go to collapse the debate good and just impact turn, collapse the debate bad and go fine. You're going to read collapse debate bad? We'll read collapse debate good. Here's a bunch of reasons why. And so that also plays into the things that I think Josh is really good at in the rebuttal. So that's where I came with it. It wasn't the team as a whole. It was at that nationals, after they make that switch, they don't lose another debate. I think they maybe lose one ballot through the rest of the tournament in finals. And so that's the thing that I think is really impressive about what happens with this SIU CR team and why I think they're able to debate Tom and Henry, because Henry and Tom's run at nationals is impressive. But when you take a team like Max and Ficker and they're just finding ways to pick them apart, that's the kind of thing that I think in prep, Todd would be excellent at doing. Todd would have watched and scouted Henry and Tom a bunch before we ever got there. And that would have been the thing where it's like, okay, here's what we're going to do in this debate. So taking all that into account, yeah, I am biased against SIU CR. I think not many people get to watch Ben Campbell, and many people look at Ben Campbell as like the tertiary debater. But Ben was excellent when he was on a script. We had to convince him to be big. We had to convince him to do the PMR because his partners were so much better at the MG. But when he was the MG with Sid and with Josh, those teams went from okay to dominant because now he was able to just get into, I'm just going to make a bunch of arguments and the debater's going to make arguments for me in the PMR.
I think another note, though, is so obviously and partly smaller when KT's debating, but they win NPTE and NPDA that year, and there's a closeout at NPDA. They win NPTE straight up against Rice. Whereas this year, SIU CR is quarters. You know, it's a bigger field, but like we were looking through the teams that are on the list that outplaced them because they came in 8th place. I haven't heard a lot of these teams. You know, like there's like one or two who I'm like familiar with, basically the two that were in finals. But like, I felt that there's a fairly big difference for me for almost all the teams. There's some exceptions like UT Tyler CH, where like the teams that doubled up versus the teams that had single nationals. I'm willing to like allow some leeway if like, well, another year you're in finals or, you know, some weird thing happened, blah, 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 blah. You got it back later, so on and so forth. But for me, the fact that they lost to some team I've never heard of in that round, and it's MPTE, so it was double elim, which means they lost to two teams, you know, whatever. So I find that a bit hard to swallow compared to KT, who again I think revolutionized the game. I would say at an absolute minimum, and I know that's not necessarily what we're doing because we're doing best of, I would certainly argue KT has a much bigger influence on later debates, on later champions, and that kind of thing than CR does. I think CR, to me, I know that you feel the opposite. You think that RS 15 is, but I think CR is the forgotten SIU national championship with like Josh Rivera. Of the four, it's the one that most people kind of sleep on.
I don't disagree that CR is just slept on much. I wouldn't say that. I think the hard part here is that, and again, I think yes, the closeout with KT, we have disagreements about what happened in that round. But I think because that's the hybrids national championship, right?
Yes.
So I think this is really a key part too. Is yes, SIU CR, and I think it's Oregon, Featherstone, and Winkle that they lose to for their second. I tried to look it up. We don't have the records, but we have the top 7 teams before them. Look, CH. Oh, I'm sorry. Where were we looking at? What were we looking at?
Lewis and Clark CH is the team that wins.
Yeah, Lewis and Clark CH. I saw UTTCH. I was like, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
Lewis and Clark CH, national champion, excellent that year. Logan and Martin from Whitman, excellent.
Correct. Yeah.
The Berkeley team is not. I mean, but this is just the restart of Berkeley, right? So that Berkeley team finishing in 3rd is excellent, but a lot of it is that restart. So I'll give you, but they're starting to do a lot of the stuff that now Berkeley does today. So I would say that Featherstone and Winkle are excellent at the time that they are debating. I think Liz Featherstone is one of the best rebuttalists I've ever seen in parliamentary debate. would go back into that conversation of best debaters to never win a national championship for me. So I understand you haven't heard of them, but being an old
I know who FV is at least. Yeah.
Okay. But my point being, right, like those are teams that I'm like, okay, cool. The hard part to stomach is some of the other teams that are above them because they're able to move ahead. Now, part of that is also like what the seedings look like and how big the MPTE was back then. I'm willing to stipulate that I think because Tom is one of the best debaters, this comes back to the way that we did the tiebreakers in the first place. I think Tom and Josh are two of the best debaters in parliamentary debate all the time. I'm willing to stipulate that today Henry would be much better than Ben. That doesn't mean I think that they would win this debate per se, but because it's tied, I'm willing to stipulate that I think probably Henry gets the tiebreaker for me over Ben, especially because the number of national championships Henry's also won. Right, like even if I concede that I don't think he's the better partner in any of that, winning 4 national championships is still winning 4 national championships. So I think that also does it. Although again, I think one of these national championships is clouded by the decision that happens in a 4-3 in semis, but we will never be able to take that back. So we can move. Yeah,
I wouldn't if I could. Wouldn't if I could.
We'll put P down forward.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So that brings us to what I think is a pretty interesting one, which is the hybrid of Lila and Jess against PAB TY, which is Henry and Brian. My take on this, which I think is also Steve's take on this, is I went with the hybrid. I honestly kind of think it's a bit of a face crush for the hybrid. I think that the requirement to beat Henry and Brian at this time is being able to answer the K, being able to keep up with them on speed. And I think that this hybrid team might be the perfect team to beat them. Because, my God, were they fast and technical. My God, were they smart. I think this might be, for me, right up there on smartest teams of all time. Like, every time I saw them debate, I was like, Jesus Christ, he's so good. Like, they were so good. So fast, so clean on the speed. And I just don't know that wheelhouse-wise, PAB TY has a lot for them. This is also Henry's first year at Berkeley. And, obviously, they beat us. They beat us in Sems. Henry and Brian ended my career. And they go on to beat Mercer in a relatively close decision in finals on Framework. But I don't think Henry was at the full sort of power at this point just yet. And I think that the inability to just win by reading Buddhism is a big problem for them this year. Like, Brian and Henry are reading that like all the time, and I don't think that gets across the line here against the hybrid. So what was your take, Steve?
I think it was a pretty easy win for me in terms of the hybrid over TY, and I'll tell you why. Well, first, so Henry and Brian, although really fast, they lose to Logan and Cody in a round that I'm judging earlier in the year. And it's because
they lost to us twice.
Yeah, I mean, well, and they should have lost in semis if we'd have gone for Kondo.
Thanks, Dallas. Anyway,
but that's the thing is the only thing that I think Henry and Brian had on everybody was you could not keep up with the flow. So if you made it about the flow, you were going to more than likely lose. Now, this was the first team that really made it about the flow and beat Mercer that year. So I think that has a big part in that conversation. But again, they're not going to be able to spread out Lila and Jess. They're not going to be able to get to their bag and do it in a way that helps, impact out to Samsara. And whatever that means, right? And so I think the whole and I'm just imagining the cross sex when I was doing this and going, what would Lila ask? Or would Jess ask? What does moo mean? And then they go, well, we can't explain it, and that would be the end of, in my opinion, the debate, because then the hybrid would be good. Cool. Let me pick apart what this means. Let me give you our criticism and what this means. Let's actually define for that. I've never seen a. Oh, go ahead.
There was a video of the hybrid debating against Vicker and Max that year at the round robin, I think. And there's this moment where Lila in First Cross is like, so I think I can't remember if it's materialism or realism, but it's one of those where it's like, so is materialism good or rationalism? Like, is rationalism good or bad? And Max is like, we didn't take a stance on that in the 1AC. And Lila's like, well, could you? And Max goes, not at this moment in time. And that's exactly how I feel like this thing would play out as well.
Yeah. No, and that's the other part of
Brian
it.
never took cross-sex seriously. I remember that, like, there's those videos of us debating them when we beat them the year before, where like every time we asked them a question about something, they're just like, I don't know. It's like, okay, cool.
Whatever you want it to be, right? But that's the other part about it is that so when the hybrid releases their playbook,
God, it's so deep.
But like, I've never seen anyone explain Batai in a way that goes, hey, let me explain to you what this actually means, right? And so when you take that and go, like, it's probably not Solar Anus, that's probably not the argument they read, but if it is, right, I'm thinking about a team that could actually explain what that is versus Brian reading Buddhism, Henry going, okay, it's going to be theory or Buddhism, let me figure out what I check down to, and the hybrid being like, we've got offense that spans across all these sheets, so you don't get to easily check down. And that's why I think it was just, I mean, again, I think this is going to be true on the right side of the bracket, but a lot of these are, for me, easy decisions.
Yeah. Okay, so that gets us back to the left side where we have PAB MY, which is Amanda and Brian, versus Lewis and Clark CH. I think, and I think you as well, if I'm not mistaken, took PAB MY in this debate.
Yep.
This is a damn good team. It is Brian 2 years later. Brian takes a year off after winning nationals with Henry. Just, I guess, lives his life or whatever. And it is Amanda Mescal. And Amanda goes on to win either 3 or 4 national championships. Could have 2 more. Just straight up. Could have 2 more. Did not really do the thing the last year as a senior. For various reasons, did not debate in semis the year before of nationals, which would have been a crush. It was against Oregon GL. Alex, Gabe, it was going to be a crush. Brian kind of almost beat you just fucking around on his own, reading 16 off or whatever it was. Tropicality was mentioned. You must specify a tropical.
In the MO.
Yeah, it was gnarly. Anyway, with that said, this is a team that is fast, that is clean, that is smart, and I think Amanda at this point has kind of taken a lot of what the earlier Berkeley teams are setting up and really refined it. I think that Amanda is on a script one of the best of all time. One of the best of all time in general, but with a script, like specifically having a script, having decided what the collapses and whatnot. I think maybe the weakness is that Amanda is predictable in this case, but they're a dominant team this year. Like they are bodying fools up, and that doesn't change the next year either from it. So this is Amanda pre-debating with Ryan, and I again have limited data about the Lewis and Clark team, but I don't think it goes potentially great for them. Now, the thing that gives me hesitancy, that makes this a little less easy, is that Logan and Martin, the team that this Lewis and Clark team beats in elims, is a very fast, very technical K and theory team. And so it's not like Lewis and Clark doesn't have a shot here. Clearly, they proved they could do it straight up. They proved they could do it reading the KF. But Amanda and Brian just would, it's not in the same way that Sam did, where it's like, oh, I just find ways to win the rounds. They just never felt like they were in danger. Like, it was so rare that you watch a debate with them where at any point you're like, oh yeah, they're losing right now, they have to make a comeback. They were just kind of smacking people around. And so I don't know, Steve, kind of what was the thought process for you?
Again, having watched this final round, I think one of the things, you're right, Logan and Martin, King Emlet King were very technical until that final round where I believe they dropped, just straight up dropped offense against LNC. And so I remember the PMR just being like, let me explain to you what just got conceded and why that wins us the debate. And so I think that it's not that Emily and McKay's championship isn't earned. It is. When you get there, you get there. But that final round against Whitman just messes up the time. Logan historically just, this used to happen to Josh a lot. People would drop disads. I was like, how do you drop a disad against the one person you can't drop a disad against? But Logan dropped, I believe it was either turns to the disad or disad to the counterpoint.
We'll link the video so people can see.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't watched it in years. But my point being is that, like, I know that the PMR stands up and is like, you can't drop offense and win in finals. And this is also really important about how that works. I don't think Amanda and Brian are dropping anything against LNC.
No shot.
LCC. And McKay's not a fast debater. Emily was fast, but not at the speed that Brian and Amanda could be at. And on top of it, they were what LNC would be great at, which is, well, again, when you get into your bag and you know what your bag is and you can work it, it works really well. And a lot of these Pacific Northwest teams are really good at the arguments they've been reading consistently. What makes Berkeley a difficult matchup for so many teams is not only are they really good at their script, but they're really good at your script. And so I think that in this debate, they would come in and going, okay, cool. If they read hip hop feminism, here's what we've got. We've got framework, we've got T, we've got Anthro, we've got Buddhism, we've got whatever we want. And then if we're AF, okay, cool. We'll read whatever we like. Now, I don't think that the straight up AF is the best thing for this team. But again, if they have to go straight up, they can. And then they will out tech in the MG Lewis and Clark. So I think PDAB MY is the easy advance for me here, just because that CH team, their run is incredible. But I mean, I remember them standing up in the middle of finals being like, we're not reading hip hop feminism. So the thing that they used to get all the way there, they were like, we're not going to do it. We want to prove that we can play the same game that everybody else is. Yeah, the boys game too. And they did. They won. So congrats to that. But I think that is not how you attack this Berkeley team.
I think the other note that I have, obviously we're going to advance them here, but I think the other note that I have, admittedly, important context, debate, this is 2019, if I'm not wrong. No, 2020. It's 2020, because it's the COVID year. Debate is small. Debate is small at this point, and I think this is one of the weakest fields we ever had. Not this team specifically. I think they were cracked. But, like, Oregon, their sophomore year is in semis of this tournament, right? We have the Lewis and Clark team with Rain and Mary. And obviously we have Deja and Mitch and Mitch's junior year. But I just think that, and I should also mention, because you just saw it was the finals, and the Rice team that was there. But the bottom line is that there were a lot of, like, A tier teams for sure at this point. You know, there's always, in my opinion, around 6 really good teams. There was just MY in the last two. Yeah, there was no argument to be made at any point that anyone was as good as them. Yeah. And so, yeah, they were cracked. Okay. Coming back to the fan favorites. And so we've got PAB SK, which is obviously Brenna Syerson and Tristan Keene, who I love dearly. And Oregon GL, which is Alex Lee and Gabriel Graville, who I love significantly less, but still love. Now, this one, despite being a 3 versus 14, gave both me and Steve pause from our sort of discussions before we actually hopped on here. Because I saw this debate. I saw this debate a number of times. Brenna and Tristan, so I guess what you'd call their sophomore year functionally. Their first year debating together. And they debated Oregon when they were at DPC. And they debated Oregon 3 times off the top of my head, maybe 4. I'm trying to think. Let's call it 3. But they debated Oregon 3 times, and they won once on topicality when Oregon missed the resolution. Like, they left before the last word of the resolution. Still counts. 5-0 top seed. They lost to Oregon in elims of that tournament. We just got smoked. And then we lost to Oregon on a 2-1 decision in elims, where we read a cap AF, and they just read, like, impact turns to cap at Elko's tournament in elims. And because of that, it's like, well, I've seen us debate Oregon. I've seen us lose to Oregon. But my thought process basically went like this. Brenna and Tristan won a round against you when they were at DVC. This is in October. So Brenna and Tristan have been debating together for a month and a half. They took a ballot off of you later on in the year. Now, you know, the total ballot score here is Oregon, what is that? 5, and the girls at 2. So it's not like they won a ton of ballots or anything. I refuse to believe in a world where we're talking about PAB SK senior year this year, 2 years of fully national circuit competition later. Because when they were on my team, it was the COVID year. We debated what we could for online tournaments, but they didn't get to go to Mile High. They didn't get to do all these. They didn't get to MPDA or NPTE. I refuse to believe in a world where they get literally 110 rounds of high-level competition against the best teams in the country. They win 4 national championships. They are prepped and coached by Alex Lee, Amanda Miskell, June Dentz, Lila Lau.
Whoa. I don't think they get to be coached by Alex Lee.
I talked to Alex about this. They get it. We counted. We counted it. Now, Alex doesn't like anti-strat Alex, but I think the idea that they are not 2 ballots better or whatever at that point, more consistent, is just crazy. Like they go on this gnarly run. They win every single national championship after this point. And while Oregon GL was a legit team and did very good that year, they beat Tyler, just whooped that ass. They lost to Rice, who I had as the lowest ranked team in the tournament. And so I know that Oregon can get popped, even though they had a very dominant year. And I think that Brenna and Tristan's senior year is just too much for Alex again. Now, with that said, and I'll pass it to Steve here, Alex is cracked. Like Alex is his senior year. He's doing some rebuttal magic as well. I just also think that he kind of taught too much of that to Brenna for it to matter. And as I just made in that recent video, I think Tristan by the end can arguably be better than even Brenna. And this team is just cracked, absolutely cracked.
So this is the matchup of debaters that turned down Pacific offers. It could have been Brenna and Gabe. You never know. But no,
she had a full ride.
Hey, you know what? Hey, when you talk about like looking at talent and being like they'll be excellent someday, they did it on their own, and that's a beautiful thing. But what gave me pause about this debate is you see it when it gets to a certain level. But again, I don't get this is the other side. I don't get to see it the way that you saw it. But there will be times where, as a coach, you'll debate your students. And there's such a big brother, big sibling moment there where a lot of times the students are like, I don't know if I could ever beat them. And that was something that you have to get over, right, in order to beat them. And I think that was always fun to go back and watch some of the debates that we would have where it was you and Dallas. And finally, you were just like, Steve, you're being an idiot. This is not true, right? And so you have to get over that. So what gave me pause was less the ability of Brenna and Tristan and more the idea that, one, Alex puts people on tilt in a way that I've never really seen in terms of the ability to explain tech, the ability to explain an idea. Now, sometimes I just don't know if it was true, like when Alex would talk about military tech. And so I was always like, I was somewhat skeptical, but by the time that they were winning nationals, it was like almost impossible for you to out-topic Oregon. And that's a really important part because I think sometimes, right, for Brenna and Tristan, they would lose the forest for the trees. In other words, they would pick the thing that was fun or pick the thing that they enjoyed, but they wouldn't figure out easy arguments, right? However, that was also, I think, sometimes Oregon's miscue. Well, when Rice said we're going to hook a tow hitch up to the moon and spin it the other direction, I was like, wait a minute, time out. How does this even compute, right? And I think that those are the kinds of things that in the moment, when you get somebody off their platform, how do they respond? And that was where I came back to with SK was that I feel like, and I agree with you. I think Tristan sometimes gets overlooked just because of Brenna's speed, but Tristan's ability to make smart arguments. I think this is just most indicative when the final round from this year's MPT comes out. You should just watch Tristan's MG making smart argument after smart argument after smart argument and they're not complicated arguments. They're just intuitive, smart arguments. And I like Gabe, and I think Gabe was excellent. But I think sometimes would perseverate or focus too much on one or two arguments and not make diverse, smart arguments. And so when it came down to it, I thought that one, again, the field plays a big role in this, right? Oregon GL's competing in partly when we're in a down era because of COVID. They're not seeing some of the small arguments. And the final part is, I think that the ability to be diverse in their answers, the ability to be diverse in the arguments they're making meant that Alex and Gabe couldn't out-topic Brenna and Tristan in this instance. And so now in the senior year, I think, because, again, as you're talking about it from 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. Sure, I think at that time Oregon's way better at going, well, here's what the topic is, here's what we know about the topic, here's how we're going to use our empirics and our evidence to beat you in this debate. I don't think they're able to do that now, looking at Brenna and Tristan.
I think the other thing that I would note is when I think about Oregon, the teams that just owned their soul was MR. And like Brian Yang, in addition to that, is like Alex is gone and stuff. And like if there's a team that's like similar to that, it's going to be the people who were kind of raised in that same tradition, right, at Berkeley, and coached in that same way. I think that poses some challenges. I also think in terms of rounds that I'm a big fan of from the Tristan MG kind of situation, the final round of Mile High this year against UC Tyler, where UC Tyler were at 10 off, I think it was either 9 off or 10 off against Brenna and Tristan. And Tristan's like, cool, new sheet, and then answers all 10. And like the new sheet's not Kondo, and they don't go for the new sheet. Is just like her ability to handle pressure in that sense is phenomenal, I think. And then Brenna, I think that Brenna, in terms of the rebuttals by the end of her career, was getting to that magic level as well, because they were a team that most of the time they were ahead. I mean, obviously they won like 50 debates in a row this year or something, and so you're going to be ahead a lot of those situations. But I would get these stories from Brenna throughout the year, and I'd kind of see it myself when I'm watching rounds, whatever, where she's like, oh, I think we might have lost that round. It's whatever. I didn't do this. I didn't do this. I didn't do this, whatever. But I think the ability of her to look and recognize all the things she was not dealing with or that she could have done better and whatnot throughout her entire career just constantly drove her to newer and newer and newer levels. And I think that goes a long way. So that brings us to Washburn KR versus SIU RS 2015. So that is Zach and Josh against Lauren and Josh. And so, oh, you made it.
Yeah, made it 2015. Just
and so this one is another one where we disagree. I think Lauren Knoth is like the prototype, for lack of a better word. I think a lot of what happened after 2012 is influenced by how good Lauren Knoth was. I think that it's hard for people who weren't around at that time to know it. I wasn't around at that time, but I have like 10 secret videos of these people debating from over the years that aren't published on the internet anywhere. And so I've seen it. And I've seen that final round against Adam Testerman and Joey Donahue, where Lauren reads 8 perms or 7 perms or whatever it is, and it's cracked. I think that this team had a good balance, and more important, let's just ignoring a lot of stuff about like the individuals, right? Aside from Lauren, this team won NPDA and NPTE back when there were like 300 teams doing parlay, and did not drop a single ballot. And it was a tournament where Josh Rivera was competing, Mike Suck was competing, Martin King was competing, Adam Testerman was competing. Like, I thought this team, for me and Steve had a big difference here. I actually had this team as my 2-seed initially. I think this team was cracked. Now, the downside of this team is, boy, did they read some bad case. Boy, did they read some dumb case, like cut up and whatnot, that were just ridiculous. I don't know what was going on in Washburn's prep room at that time. But this is a team, to go perfect is so hard at a tournament. You know what I mean? When you're talking about NPDA finals, you're talking about 7 judges. NPTE final, like 7 judges. And I think that speaks to a crazy level of consistency, of ability to beat debaters coming from different perspectives. And that for me was a lot. Now, SIU RS is Josh Rivera his senior year, which is also a very, very, very good debater. And it's Zach Schneider as well. I think that the other thing that kind of breaks it down for me is, if you can lose to KCC, by God, can you lose to this team, in my opinion? Obviously, there's very different teams, very different perspectives and whatnot, but I have definitely felt strongly that KR has the advantage here. Now, I'm going to let Steve make the exact opposite case on why RS15 was a good team.
So I think there's 2 parts to this. One is having lived through it, but then 2 is kind of knowing who KR was the year before, and then who they became that year they went nationals, right? So first, Lauren's freshman year, debating with Joe Allen. This is my senior year of debates. Lauren's freshman year is my senior year, 2009. MPDA is at Pacific, and they're in semis. It's Lauren and Joe Allen versus Oregon.
Fields Gander.
No. Gander and who's Haley? What is Haley's last name? I can't remember Haley, but it's Matt.
Are you talking about finals? Or are you talking about?
No, the semis is
okay, because I thought they were okay.
No. So semis is not. So again, this is Lauren's freshman.
Oh, you're talking 2009. Sorry,
yeah. 2009.
Okay.
Lauren's freshman year is Matt Gander and Haley. I can't remember Haley's last name. They're in semis. Now, they really want to see how fast Lauren can go before Lauren breaks. Or this is before Lauren breaks her jaw.
I think so.
Their strategy, Oregon's strategy was 7-8 off. We're gonna read 2 counter plans, 3 specs, 2 disads, and just see if you can hang. And that gets them all the way to finals, where they lose to Reno on a pretty decisive ballot count. Okay, Lauren then breaks her jaw, comes back junior year, debating with Ramsey. That junior year, they're not fantastic. They're just not. They're okay, and they're debating well, but they make it to finals, and they are a shock to make it to finals that year when they debate Gander and Fields. And once again, Gander puts it to them. But because they make it to finals, there used to be this thing in MPDA where it was like the NBA. You didn't get to win a national championship until you had put in your dues and lost in like a finals or a semis. And I remember this because it was Reno that Max and David were the first team. So they didn't win a single tournament all year, and then they won back-to-back national championships in NMPT and MPDA. And so they're the first team to kind of disprove that. But we're still in an era where there's so many teams that in order for you to be seen as legitimate, you got to make it to finals, right? And the year before that, Fields and Gander had made it to finals, but they had lost to Colorado. And when MPT was at, I want to say Azusa Pacific. So you've got this building, right? And so while Lauren and Ramsey's move to dominance was really good, living through it, I also know that the amount of political capital, the amount of benefit of the doubt, watching rounds where I'm like, this is way closer than what everybody's making it out to be, and we're just ignoring some dropped arguments that are happening. I watch that and I go, okay, so in that time frame, would that have played against some of these teams later on? Now, note, the year that they win nationals is all that MPT is also the year Josh's freshman year, and they don't want to debate Josh. They like debating Mike and Ben. Mike wants Josh as his partner. But at the time, Todd was like, we're not going to break up partnerships randomly at the end of the year. I don't care, blah, 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 blah. So Josh debates with Sid. Josh and Sid are in semis in the NPTE. They have no right being there, given how Sid's credentials are. And they should be in finals against this KR team. So Josh, as a freshman, is out there making this team not want to debate them. Josh, as a freshman, is out there almost earning the right to give them the chance to beat him his freshman year. And then we get to Josh senior year, and now Josh has been through everything, right? And that's where I think the RS conversation for me is so difficult, because I look at Zach as somebody who spent all this time at Cedarville wanting to read different arguments, couldn't read them, wanting to build debate theory, couldn't read the arguments that he wanted to, couldn't go for the arguments he wanted to, couldn't get to the terms he wanted to get to. Finally gets to SIU, and now he's winning consistently, right? And winning consistently against teams that are just talking trash to him and Josh, right? I remember an Oklahoma team claiming that sometime during the summer, Josh had made fun of them. And I remember talking to Josh, I have no clue who these people are. And this was consistent with Josh at this point, to the point where I think if Josh had another option for school, by the time his senior year came in, he might have taken a different option because he was just tired, right? People used to make fun of him for not reading critical arguments. He got called an Uncle Tom by people. He got called out for being better. He got, I remember Kyle Dennis went on a tirade one time about how fast Josh was and how he was ruining parliamentary debate because he was too fast for everybody else. And so when you're this like bulwark for everybody being mad at you, right? And you're going up against a team that everybody loves, that can be really difficult. But by the time Josh was a senior, nobody disliked Josh. Nobody disliked Zach. In fact, I think that in a lot of ways, they were the fan favorites at NPDA, and they lost a very close round, reading a strategy that neither of them wanted to read. And I think that that also plays into it, because being in the prep room for that round, Josh really wanted to be like, look, we don't have to read a straight up argument. We can get an internal link to all of their arguments by talking about race in Brazil. And the conversation was, well, look at the panel. The panel's not going to buy that. We thought that the panel wasn't going to buy their argument. And so they got talked off of an argument. So yes, they lost to KCC, but they lost on a strategy they didn't want to read. That's inside knowledge. You have videos of Lauren and Josh nobody gets to see. I have inside knowledge. Nobody else. I have inside knowledge nobody else gets to know. Right. So that's not the strategy they wanted to read. And if we could get Brent Nicholson on here, he would confirm that based on conversations he had with Zach. That was not the strategy they wanted in finals. But it's the strategy they lost in the debate. So fair enough, they lost. But the second part about that is Lauren and Josh, and I think this is the important part about Ramsey. You called him a silver-tongued devil in our conversation.
Devil.
Yeah, but I'll never forget scoffing at the term swagger jack, and then like other people tell me like, no, it works, and then that was the thing, was he could try to swagger his way through the debate round. I don't think you get to do that being him against Josh and Zach. Now, KCC certainly put Zach on tilt, but that's a far different form of tilt. I don't think that he's going to stand up and be like, would you consider yourself racist? Right? I don't think that Zach is in any way apologizing for anything in cross-ex. And watching in other rounds where they're reading give up the badge, where they're reading identity arguments are bad, where they're debating against people who read as white but are not necessarily white, and arguing against those arguments consistently. It was a bad time to read a bad AF in front of a lot of people, and that's the SIU RS loss. But every other win in that tournament against teams that are reading critical arguments, teams that have no business they're not taking ballots from KCC. KCC made Sweets, aka Whitman, Margaret and Zach basically like throw in the towel. It was so bad in semis. People were leaving crying, and again, this became a big conversation of like, is this appropriate behavior, all that kind of. So KCC was owning other teams and could not do that even in a round where Zach made the biggest gaffe in finals of all time. So I think sometimes we look at it and go, the statistics aren't there. They only had 1 year. Fair enough. But they were the most dominant team that year. I don't think that Josh can. I don't think that Ramsey can hang with Rivera. I don't think Ramsey can hang with Zach. And I don't think that the thing that happened to SIU RS in finals of NPDA happens against any other team than that singular team in that singular moment. And so when we talk about, I think Lauren's great. I think Lauren's easily one of the top 10 debaters in this field. We were talking about this the other night, and I was like, well, I'm probably way low and way high on some people, but there's excellent debaters across this field. But to ignore that Josh is probably the GOAT.
In this round, the other Josh is by far the worst debater.
Yeah, oh yeah, Ramsey's the worst debater. So Rivera's the GOAT. And I think Zach at this point, it's not slept on, but is not understood for all how good he was at framework. Like, cut-up would not have worked against Josh and Zach, Rivera and Schneider. It just wouldn't have. Because, one, we were already ready for cut-up. Two, you wouldn't have been able to do it against Rivera. He would have made a bunch of arguments about the way that cut-up is white and ethnocentric. And he was ready for the argument. And then Zach is so good at getting to the argument. I think, and Zach was one of the first people who would say about how good Lauren was. So Zach learned from Lauren. So I think this comes back to the same kind of PAB, Oregon GL kind of thing, which is, I think Alex is really good and might have been the best debater in that matchup. But when you put them together, RS is so much better to me than KR in terms of technical proficiency, in terms of who they were at that point in their career, and then just in terms of what Parley is, right? Like, if I'm saying I think Henry could out-tech Ben, there's not a chance that Josh Ramsey exists in the parliamentary debate world that we have today and is able to make it to finals the way he made it to finals that year. So that's my other thing. I just think
kind of thing where like Ian had made it the year before with Ryan, where like Ian wasn't like, that's just not a thing you can do anymore. Just
right. And if you like, I think that's the other part is right. It's not just Pearly today, but this matchup specifically. Again, matchups make fights. I think this is a matchup that RS is ready for, and is a matchup that fits well with him. I think that they're like, if it was Tolchard and Yang, I don't know that they're able to hang. But that's where I go. This is a matchup where we get the 12-5, we get the upset pick in the NCAA tournament bracket.
Yeah, it's the first upset of the tournament. I think that's fair. I think that you make a lot of really good points there. So for our final octafinal round, we have Washburn BK versus PAB Lamar. So BK is Caitlin Boole and Ryan Kelly, Machine Gun Kelly, as we used to call him. And they won NPTE, NPDA, and the National Round Robin that year. And they were in finals of NPTE against UT Tyler CH the year before. And Ryan Kelly had been in finals freshman year of NPDA against Josh and Ben. Against PAB MR, which is Amanda again, but this time with Ryan Rashid. I think, again, Amanda, really, really good debater. I don't think this one would be close. And I'm doing MMA math, admittedly, because here's how I break this down. BK routinely would clap Berkeley KL. Now, there are a few times it got away from them, right? But they beat him in finals. Obviously, they beat them in semifinals.
Beat him in finals on a bad strat by them.
Yes.
Like, I remember voting on this to be like, I think I'm the only one that's going to be voting for BK. And Jonathan Bruce was making fun of me because we were both on the same panel. Yeah. So was Cheese Right.
Was it like 6-1 or 5-2?
It was a 5-2, and I walked out and be like, well, guess I didn't make the worst decision, did I?
Yeah, but and so BK that year was cracked, and they also had another good team around them with Washburn BS, and so they were getting pushed, and they had that crazy good prep room with Double D and Kevin O'Leary, and Lauren Canove was prepping them at this tournament as well. And but anyway, they beat Tom and Tom at both nationals. They eliminated them both nationals, once in finals, once in semis. At round robin, they similarly crushed everyone. And I think that they beat that team on kind of the exact same stuff that we would see from MR in this debate. I just think that Washburn was an antidote to Berkeley at this time. I really do think, and we haven't talked about this a ton individually, but I really do think SIU and Washburn exiting at the time that they did, despite being on top when they exited, because obviously SIU was in finals that year, BK wins both nationals, all that stuff the next year, whatever. I think that in a lot of ways paved the way for Berkeley to be as dominant as they were, because it was no longer like this force checking against them in terms of this Midwest powerhouse and this different style of debate. Ryan was the fastest debater in the country, and it wasn't close. Was not close. Fantastic MG, also a great LOR. Steve, obviously Caitlin is a very good debater, one of the best of all time, but I thought that Ryan was the better person in this partnership, and Steve feels the opposite way. And so at that point, what we're really saying is, of two of the best debaters of all time, we can't even decide which one's better. It's not like a Josh Zach situation or whatever. And they were beating people everywhere. They were beating people on long form, and they beat Berkeley on T. They beat Berkeley on long form, right? They weren't afraid of anyone. They weren't afraid of anyone in the country. They were just mobbing people left and right. Really good team who had been there before a bunch of times. MR obviously debates at, again, one of the weakest times in Parley's history. It's a lot smaller. It is online. When you look at the teams that they beat, these are not teams that I would necessarily consider all-time greats. It's basically a lot of like weakened teams from the year before. Basically, if you went to like those teams the year before or one of the other teams on that team, most people thought they were better. But me and Steve, I think, both probably voted for Amanda Miskell every time we ever saw them in their entire career. And I used to vote for Ryan and Amanda like it was my job. They were a very good team with very simple strats. But I also think this would be the biggest problem for them to me. They're gonna read their case. If you watch the finals of NPT and NPDA this year, I've talked about this a lot. It's the same exact script. You could not play that shit with Washburn. At this time, you could not, because Washburn, the roots there is Harvard policy debate. You know what I mean? Like we talk about like KO and then like Double D's background and whatnot. And so this is a team where if they know what you're gonna read, they're getting you. And so for me, I go Washburn BK here. Part of this is also I never debated Amanda and Ryan. I judged them, and it's a little bit different. I debated Washburn BK a lot. It was not fun. It was really not fun. They were super good. And so yeah, that's where I go, Steve. Where you kind of land on this BKMR discussion?
I won't add too much more. I think here's the thing. This is probably the only time I vote against Ryan and Amanda ever. And that's a key part about this. They're so good at judge adaptation. I mean, I would guess that 95% of all rounds in front of me were either Ant or Nietzsche. And I was like, well, that works. So they knew how to debate in front of certain people. I think that the part here that was really good about Kelly and Ryan is that, or sorry, Caitlin and Ryan, Ryan Kelly. Yeah. Anyways, God damn it, I did it wrong. Rebecca. Okay, Bull and Kelly. We'll just go that way. A lot of names in my head. Bull and Kelly. The best part about them is that I'm thinking about this Boise round in semis, the year that they win MPDA, right? And Boise's up here. MPTE. Okay. Whatever year it is, whatever round tournament it is.
Yeah.
But Boise's reading chemtrails and conspiracies. And I was like, oh no. And then I believe Ryan just stands up and goes, let me just make a mockery of this.
I remember someone offered me odds on this round after the first speech, and they were like, we're taking Boise. And I was like, oh yeah, however much you want. However much you want to bet on this round. Go ahead and let me know. Like
and so at that point, I think you'll watch, like, even if Berkeley has tricks in their bag, right? Caitlin and Ryan aren't messing around, right? And so I think that this becomes, once again, I said about UTT, I said about SIU RS. It's also really important. This is their like final run at it, right? And so they both had multiple shots beforehand, and that kind of that drive that we don't always see, because when you talk about Washburn, SIU leaving at the time opens the door up for Berkeley. You got to remember that the MPTE used to be a Pacific Northwest tournament, and NPDA used to be the Midwest style tournament. So to see so many teams that are not that are West Coast, but really it's just Berkeley, this becomes an important kind of context to what's happening here, which is so much of the MPTE back in the aughts and the early 2010s was PNW did the MPTE and they rocked that. And you might have one team like a Washburn or an SIU get in there versus NPDA, where by the time we got to quarters, it was primarily more teams that weren't as ready for the tech debate or didn't have to rely on tech so much to speak. So I think this is the other thing about Washburn BK. They don't have to rely on tech. They can, and they can out-tech you. But I don't think that PAB does a really good job here against this team. So I think that's all I've got to say is that this team, made a mockery of the tricks. MR doesn't have any tricks. It's going to be BK, and I think BK very easily.
Okay, so we'll go slightly quicker now that we've sort of introduced all the teams as we work through the quarterfinal round. First matchup is SIU RS against PAB KT. Once again, MMA math for me says this is a smash for Mike and Josh, and the eye test says this is a smash for Mike and Josh, and the results from both years says this is a smash for Mike and Josh. Again, now I think Tom and Henry is a better team than Tom and Tom, but Tom and Tom get eviscerated by Sam Cook, like get just in that Mile High final, get destroyed by them, right? And Sam just has all the answers. You can't do this. Doesn't matter how fast you go. Doesn't matter what K you read. Like, it just doesn't work against this kid. And Josh and Zach beat up on that UT Tyler team, granted a year earlier. Replace Zach with Mike Selk. I can't imagine, like, you can't go fast enough for it to matter. They don't care if you do layers and prelims, but more importantly, here's the thing, right? I think in a lot of these debates where you have two very technical teams, the team that actually wins is the team that ethos out. Mm-hmm. Like the first, you said this a lot, Steve. It's one of the big takeaways I have from you that I still tell my students. But like, first team to go slow at nationals tends to win, and in elims in general, first team to go slow tends to win. And I don't know that I ever saw Henry or Tom go slow. Like they're not collapsing to anything, and Josh and Mike just are. Josh and Mike 100% go for condo. Okay. They always make they make time for condo. Okay, they're gonna find a way to get it done, and I just don't think that any of the kind of tricks are gonna pan out for Berkeley in this round. I think that the fact that they have those rounds against Ficker and Max, as we said, where they get figured out. Ficker and Max aren't half the team that SIU RS is.
No,
in any department. So yeah.
And I think the only thing I'd add to this is by the time we're here too, and this comes back to that semifinal round. If you ever watch with Whitman, King Wang versus Mike and Josh, before the round starts, Ben Dodds, who by most people is considered one of the best critics on the circuit at the time, is basically like, "Hey, I'm going to need to sit closer because between Mike's junior and senior year, now Mike used to scare people with how loud he was." And what we did was we worked to say, hey, can we take it up to a top notch and bring it down? Just start soft, right? And so Dodds even mentions, he's like, hey, with this new quieter SIU, I need to sit closer and we need to keep it down, yada, yada, yada. And I think that's the part where at this point, not only most of the rounds you see of Mike's big and fast, but by this point, he has gotten to a top speed without having to use as much voice and vocality, without having to use as much volume. And I don't even think they can I don't think that KT can spread RS out of the debate. So Mike will read Kondo, and then they'll go for whatever they want. I think it's more of a quick win in terms of whatever side it is. Because then if they're neg, right, let's say that KT reads set call, okay, it's niche and framework. And that's a debate that they've had a bunch of times over and over again. Or it's disableism and T. It's consistently like just let's get to what we do well. We're going to outpace you. And then this used to be a rule, and I try to make it for my teams now, where we have to put 3 minutes on case. So when you're talking about that too, we're not thinking about it in the context of parliamentary debate today, but this is T, whatever criticism they read, and then 3 minutes answering set call. In a world where this team has answered give back the land, because Washburn used to have a team that was very aggro against, it was Evan and Dan. And they used to get really mad about how many times they would lose to Josh and Mike, to the point where I think at MPDA this year, it was the first elim, and I was so terrified that they were going to lose because Evan put Josh in such a position where he got because Evan's this larger white kid yelling at Josh, talking a bunch of mess in his speech. And Josh goes, no, I'm going to make them regret this decision, when Mike's telling them to move on. And then, they sweep them. And that's the kind of ethos against set call or give back the land or anything like that I think RS would have. So I also just don't think that the primary argument that Katie and Tolchard are reading at this time is able to fly either. So
they went fast. They never felt like they had to go fast. That's the thing. Like when you would watch these rebuttals by Tom and Henry, vote for top Italian. It's just like right to the top, right? Like, but when you watch these final rounds and whatnot from Josh and Mike, you know what I mean? It's like, it's going to be an easy decision for SIU, and the battle will read this thing specifically going really slow still for a long time. Now let's start answering. Like they just no fear. I think
it was methodical. Yeah.
Easy clap. You got the goat. You got one of the goats. It's going for it. Interesting round here. PAB MY, SIU RS. Josh's senior year. Once again, we come back to it. I think in previous rounds, Zach Schneider got the benefit of being, like against KR here, like, okay, well, he's better than this debater, whatever. He can hang. He's not going to get spread out, that kind of thing. I think that the benefit Zach has here is Zach loves to prep out, and it's pretty easy to prep out against his team because they're reading the same stuff. But I do worry that Zach's the fourth best debater in the round. I'm not sure. He might be better than Ryan. I'm not entirely sure. I definitely don't think he's better than Amanda.
And I would put it this way. I think at best, he is on par with one of them. Now, it depends on what you value in a debater, right? I don't think he's got the speed that Brian does. And I don't think he has the explanatory ability on the criticism or on the impact debate. If it were theory, I think he's better than Amanda at theory. I think he's better explaining that than Amanda. But I don't think that overall he's the debater that Amanda is. At best, he is equal to it's a tie for third in this debate.
Yeah, I think that when we start talking about God, this team was so fast. They were so good. But the thing is, they always read the same thing.
Yeah.
You know, and how does that work against a Josh and a Zach at this point? Now, again, I know I keep harping on they lost to KCC, which I find concerning. And MY didn't really lose to anyone. The one round that they lost at Nationals that year was because Amanda didn't go to it. This one's actually tough for me because I still think Josh is the best debater in this round. I think SIU as the AF able to read and go for Kondo and knowing they will go for Kondo gives them a big advantage in a lot of context. But Berkeley, I don't know, because I feel like maybe I'm misremembering, but I feel like Amanda and Brian would usually read the K and maybe theory rather than K theory disad or anything like that, or counter. Like they weren't as Kondo most of the time in my experience.
They didn't give as many outs. That was the part
but they were still reading Buddhism at this point. And Zach, like I said, Zach had a lot of cracked answers to Buddhism when we came together on it. And if they had been reading it all year, I think that's pretty big for them. In a straight up debate, I almost certainly would say SIU RS. Like if it was just, that. And I would also say I felt, and I still feel, that Berkeley's files are kind of bad at NPTE specifically. Because they rely so much on the K most of the time. And I don't feel that way at all about SIU's. And so it's tough for me because I think of Brian and Amanda so unbelievably good, like both of them. But I don't know if this is a situation where, other than hoping to spread out, because the thing is, if you're spreading out Zach, I feel like you're spreading out the panel.
Well, isn't this that's the semis of your senior year, isn't it? Right? Like where Zach's like, had you gone for Kondo, I didn't have anything Brian said. And I think that that's the hard part, especially against Brian, is that everybody wanted to pretend they could hang. My favorite moment was, I think this was earlier in the tournament, you were debating them and Cheese Right was the judge. And Cheese was like, nah, I had none of that. Nah, I'm not even playing that game. And so I think that is if you have judges who go, nah, that's not an argument. And then on top of it all, I don't think that you could say predictions aren't real and what is it, resurrection is, or whatever that they were reading. Like those are things that Josh would just be like, no. And like you said, Zach is already prepped out against Buddhism. I think it would be a harder question on Anthro, because I mean that was the thing about Josh, that when he could get to an environment topic or an Anthro topic, he was excellent. Nobody would ever read it against him. The one time it did happen, it was Josh and Sid at the NPTE, and they were debating a Whitman team. I think it was Drake and maybe it was Logan. It was a Whitman team, and Josh out impacted them. So then again, like I said, I think this is the hard part for me, is looking at this and going, I think Amanda and Brian are two of the most technically proficient debaters in this bracket. But I think Zach and Josh are two of the most efficient, even if they're not proficient at everything. And Josh is clearly, I think we've talked about, he's probably the best. So I think that this is against style makes fights. It's hard for me to go one way or the other. It really does depend on what side of the debate they're on. But I think all things being equal, right? Like PDAB has one S tier kind of situation, which is their neg. They can read whatever they want, and the panel doesn't fuck with Kondo. I think SIU RS has an A tier in every single situation.
Yeah.
So that's the hard part.
I think the other thing to consider here is that really every year of Brian's career, except for this year, he was beatable.
Yeah.
I mean, admittedly, his first year, his partner was, just kind of there, for lack of a better word, and he lost a lot of debates that year. Him and Henry even were losing debates. We beat them a few times. They lost to other teams. Literally no one thought Henry and Brian were going to win national title. It wasn't even a thought process. Right. But Amanda almost never lost, period. Amanda was in semis of NPTE the freshman year against Concordia and beat them. So it's tough for me, but yeah, I guess I would say that it's one of those things where at the point where I'm starting to think about panel stuff, kind of agree. I think absent a panel that like really fucks with the Berkeley stuff, I don't know that they have a great shot in this round to me. Other than spreading them out, I just don't think like the other thing was, admittedly, the mistake that I had, ignoring the like part where Dallas should have gone for Condon, is I didn't read offense famously, and Josh Rivera would.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
and so I think that would have made it harder for them to go for it. I think that also, admittedly, this Berkeley team lost earlier in this tournament to UT Tyler because UT Tyler was waiting in finals, and Berkeley had to debate Rice in a relatively close round in semis. And so I'm gonna go though. I'm thinking, despite it being SIU versus PDAB in both rounds, I think I do go SIU RS, which I don't think was the case in my personal bracket originally. I don't think I ended up with SIU RS, but now that we've talked it through, I actually feel more comfortable with that. So that's cool. All right, so let's go to the other side of the bracket. What a round this would be.
Oh my goodness.
UT Tyler CH against the hybrid. I think that this is a crazy round because I do think Sam's the best debater in this round. I think that I don't want to like I'm thinking about, if I think about debaters who are similar in style and in skill to Lila, which is very few because Lila was so cracked. I think Ali is relatively close. Ali's probably slower though, and Sam used to just handle Ali and Sean, and Sam and Steven are not going to get spread out. And this is the biggest thing for me. Lila and Jess knew more about the K and were more well read on the K than like everyone they debated. I don't know that Sam is as well read, but he's close.
It's the lit base though. This is where again it's such a matchup because I think broadly Sam's one of the most well-read theoretical debaters in terms of philosophy that I've seen. Like reading, not just let me read back files, reading Fanon, reading Wilderson, reading Lacan, like just reading theory and reading Deleuze and Guattari and being like, hey, this isn't just fun, let me talk about it, right? So reading it, digesting it. Lila's on that same level, but the bent is not the same, if that makes sense. Like it's almost like I want to say Sam is more psychoanalysis,
yes,
and Lila is more Marxism and queer theory, right? Yeah. And they have strains of the same thing, but that's what makes this such an interesting matchup, because I don't think it's that how well read on the K are you, it is what is the criticism and what is the lit base you get to check down to.
I also think that when we come back to like strength for strength, if we're talking about Lila at cross-X, I think Sam's better at cross-X. I think Sam's maybe the GOAT cross-X debater. I think that, like you said, the resurrection, like not that this team was ever down, but in the rounds that they were down, they came back really hard. They just were hard to kill. And I also think that, again, kind of coming back to this time or whatever, like I just can't get over that round where Sam debates with Skylar against KL and is not flowing, does not have a desk. He's sitting on the ground, like not flowing, goes up, just domes the K off the top of the head. Is behind, they're just way behind on the flow because Skylar can't debate at this point. And does not matter at all because Sam convinces everyone that it's irrelevant. And similarly, in the context of the debating or whatever, like obviously, if they all won nationals, but you know Sam has been in finals before. They're the prohibited best team in the country, which is not what people felt about the hybrid at the time because they came into they didn't debate together the first semester. Yep. And you know they have a legit closeout, fair enough. And again, they're all very smart in this round, but I just think that it basically took a massive fuck up or a miracle to beat UT Tyler this year, right? Like you had to have a judge who either loved Kondo in a prelim and just get that one judge, or you had to have judges who would vote on the F word K. You know what I mean?
And I also think that, right, like we're talking about Sam and Lila, but I think not no opinions on the individual as a person, but that's not what we're talking about here, right? Like there are people on this bracket that I would not fuck with individually, but in a debate round, right? I think this is really important. Steven went, what was it, 6-0?
Went 6-0 top speaker.
Top speaker at Mile High as a Maverick. When he's debating, I mean,
Washburn
I remember
BK.
Yes,
BK.
He's debating and he's debating Washburn, not just BK, but he debates Quentin and Will at that tournament.
Ali and Sean.
And
Ariel.
He's sick. He's doing it with a flu. I remember he's walking in around with a blanket wrapped around him.
If they had let him debate on Elam's, he would have won the tournament.
Yeah, and so I think that's the other.
And most people don't even mention Steven skill wise in the same breath as Sam.
Right.
That's
so I think that for me, although I like the hybrid, I like their ability. They present the most in football. We call it the read option. Right, they can do so many things that you just don't know where the ball is until it's too late. I like that because we talk about the Cape, but they're excellent at theory too. They are ready to read long form framework. They're ready to read spec. They're ready to read net.
Very well prepared team.
Right, they're just set to read anything they need to. And Jess is fantastic as well. So it's hard for me, but when I think about just talent level, it's hard to match the fact that you get Sam twice in a debate, and then Steven's maybe the single greatest in terms of, hey, who's a Robin in this, right? Like that's the hard part. It's like I wouldn't characterize a Mike Selk as Robin or Josh, but like if we go through these partnerships we've been talking about, right? Like Henry's kind of a Robin to the Batman and each, right? Like Steven is one hell of a Robin.
Yeah.
He's like, hey. So that's the part where I go. To me, it's UTTCH for that reason. Mm-hmm. Even though I think it's probably a 4-3 style debate. It's not a. This is not a dog walking.
It would be an amazing round.
Right. Yeah.
We got SKBK. So PAB SK, Brennan Tristan against Ryan and Taylor. This is another one that's a toughie for me. BK was super good. The only team that really handled them in any way was, they lost every once in a while to Tom and Tom, and obviously they lost to UT Tyler like every time they ever debated. BK debates in a significantly bigger time for debate. Obviously, Washburn's still around, SIU's still around. Berkeley's starting to be very good. They're in finals this year. Ali's still around. The Jewell folks who are in this tournament are still around. And again, Washburn has the other. I mean, the thing is, when you think about it, like I actually didn't go through and do this, but in the season that Washburn wins this, a bunch of the teams that are in this tournament, or debaters who are at least in this tournament, are debating. Yeah. And so, I mean, debate is literally almost 10 times as big at this point. Again, the year that Washburn wins, there's like over 100 entries at nationals, like well over 100. And Ryan is fast, and Caitlin is smart, and they make a lot of good decisions. And because they're straight up a lot of the time, they don't leave a lot of room to lose on things like T, which Brennan and Tristan have definitely made their name on. Their Washburn BK's prep is way better. It's just way better.
I think that's the advantage, the one advantage I think that is clear in this debate.
Yes. Now here's the thing. Tristan does not care how fast you go.
Correct.
Like literally, Tristan does not care. It does not. Again, you can read 10 off. 10, this is the other thing. You know what? Actually, I hadn't thought about this, and this might have just resolved it all for me in my head. I had not thought about this at all. Washburn BK is pre-computer. Brenna and Tristan are debating people, and Brenna and Tristan are on paper only. They're paper only team. Right. They're debating people who are reading perfectly typed up files that are way longer than anything you can prepare by hand, reading it off their computer screen, copy and paste text and whatnot. Like Washburn BK, this is the year that Berkeley starts to must pass text. None of that exists. I hadn't really thought about this, but the fact that Brennan and Tristan can hang with UT Tyler shit spreading perfect files or whatever, you know what I mean, and all that kind of stuff. I think it is a big deal for them in the context of the trial. Like, I don't know if the debate is necessarily faster these days, but there's just a lot more red, I feel. Sorry, go ahead. And then let me one last thing here. So Tristan, I think, can hang, and if you can overcome that, I think that's when Ryan's weakest. And then the second element is that Brenna can swag out in this female. Brenna can swag out, man, in a rebuttal. And Ryan was very like, I remember Ryan's LOR would always be like, "There's three parts to this problem. The first is magnitude, the second is probability." Like, it's the wrong era almost. Like, debate isn't. There's not as many people, so it's lacking in that dimension of skill in a competition. Even though, once again, I think there's only ever 6 good teams in the country, basically. Like, well, not good, but elite teams in the country. And Brenna and Tristan get the benefit of like another almost literally 10 years of development of the activity, the technical nature of the activity, and all those kinds of things. And so, sorry, that's a lot, but what are your thoughts, Steve? I'm still not sure how I'm going.
I think it's hard. So the first place I started is the prep out. I didn't make it any secret to you during finals of the MPT. I thought the app was bad.
I told Brenna this to her face.
I was like, what is this ass? Why am I watching it again? But then you weren't there at the tournament, and I love Jazz and Casey, so this is no snark at them. But I was listening to the debate, and I legit thought I missed something, because I was like, wait a minute, it's
specking the ticks.
It's specking a diss ad. I thought there had to be
the same diss ad they read the round before,
and a diss ad that nobody understands how the budget process works. We'll leave it at that. So.
Real quick, and just for the people really historic context, most politics diss ads are political capital internal news stories. This was a floor time diss ad,
and more importantly, it's also a question of like, well, we don't pass a budget in 2 days. Guess what? If the government shuts down for a day, that's the longest it's ever been shut down for. It'll get passed. So there's a lot to this the final round.
It's also next year's budget, bro.
Right.
Anyway, sorry.
My point being, if I hadn't watched that, I'd probably feel less decisive about the prep out. And again, I just watched this Washburn team in finals of LD, thinking this prep out's fine, but not great, especially given the evidence. But Washburn BK is going to be infinitely better prepped out than I think Brenna and Tristan. That doesn't mean I think that they are better debaters, but I think that prep out really does make a big difference in how close this conversation is. At the same time, the other part that's hard for me is I think Brenna and Tristan benefit from an era where people think breadth is going to help them still, and it doesn't. Depth helps you. And I think that is actually one of Brenna and Tristan's strengths, is that if the debate is smaller, it helps them. However, that's also one of Washburn BK's strengths, right? Is that the debate being smaller and focused allows depth and allows you to start comparing. Where I give the edge, and I think that I know my bracket, but I'm also been going back and forth on this debate and kind of as we get into semis. But I think where I give the edge to Brenna and Tristan is this. It's not the swag, because Caitlin had swag, and it depends on the side. I think this is the issue. Their ability to get to an impact from an argument that may not be fully developed and then develop it is so much better in this era than I think it was for Washburn BK. And I'm remembering this final round between the Toms and Caitlin and Ryan. I'm remembering how it's a question of the UN, and I'm remembering how bad that prep out was for Berkeley and the decisions that were made in that round by Berkeley going, what are we like? This is not how you win a final round, at least at the time. Now it's probably more likely the way you win a final round. But thinking about it then going, is the prep out for Brenna and Tristan better than it was at that time? Most certainly. Are they better at getting to away from the theory question to a counter plan, to a disad that they can leverage the debate? Almost certainly. Are they beatable when it's depth versus breadth? Yes. Can Washburn BK be the team that does it? I just don't think that, despite the prep out, they're as good at the bottom of the debate when it comes to the end of the debate as Brenna and Tristan. So I would give the move to Brenna and Tristan because of that. But I think it's like the beginning part for me on this right side of the bracket was dog walk, dog walk, dog walk, dog walk. But now these are some of the hardest debates for me to determine because they're so good and tight in terms of being the similar team that it's hard to be like, what is the thing that makes the difference? And I think impact analysis is the thing that makes the difference here.
My other thought here is that BK read some awful Ks. That K they read in finals against each other was terrible. And I think Brennan Tristan do that less. I think that it would be very hard for Washburn to beat Brennan Tristan on theory. And I think if that poses problems for them. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm willing to give it to Brennan Tristan here. Obviously happy to say it, but very good teams. I don't think this would be a stomp by any means, but I think that the biggest advantage for me, and I know you don't agree with this, but the biggest advantage for me that BK had was just Ryan Kelly outspreading everyone and being so clean with it. And I don't think that matters against Brennan Tristan.
Well, and I would put it this way. It's not that I disagree with that. So I don't know that that's a huge advantage all the time. It's an advantage when you get to then go for the depth. But again, it's the same thing with Josh. So many, by the time Ryan's debating as well, it's okay to go that fast. Ryan is super fast. Does that mean the arguments are good? Not necessarily. But in this bracket, there's not a person that Ryan can spread out of the debate, or that he's so much faster than that. Is he faster than Brian Yang? I just don't. I wouldn't say that. So that's where I think the speed then has to be the question of what comes after speed. And it's not that I didn't like Ryan. It's just I think that the impact analysis is not where it needs to be against a team like Brennan Tristan.
So the good news is, obviously, we're coming up on 2.5 hours. So the good news is, this one for me takes 3 seconds.
Yeah.
It is SIU RS 2013. It is a worse Josh. It is a much better Mike Selk.
Yeah.
It's not close. Like the strats, the prep, it's all going to be very similar. SIU RS 2013, Mike Selk is much better. Like,
and if I could just give this, like, there are 2 things that make this for me. One, it's 2 debaters who are growing up in a system versus a debater who's been in the system and a debater who's learning that system the first year, right? Yes. And then the second thing is Josh earned the nickname Little Tank his freshman year because at Jewell, which used to be the season opener, people just kept reading cap, and he just kept reading turns to cap, right? And so even in a round where he's got to debate himself, the difference is going to be who can utilize the turns to the impact or the impact analysis the best. And I think that's Mike.
He's already very good sophomore year. Is a big part of it. The other
isn't he top speaker? And
yeah. They're also. I mean, the other thing is that Josh and him, they're more consistent this year, even than they are when it's him and Zach. And so there's a lot of things going for him. I don't want to spend enough time there because
we got to move on.
Same debater against himself. Congrats on being so good, Josh, that you were in 3 partnerships on this board. So this one's where it gets interesting. You and me both went through this process, and we both came to the same conclusion. But with that said, here's what you have to lay here. That's a struggle. Brennan and Tristan have 4 national championships. They have the longest win streak ever, near as I can tell, in parliamentary debate. I would say this season might be one of the best seasons anything's ever had. The first 2 tournaments of the year, they're in semis. They lose a combined 3 rounds. They do not lose another round until the last day of the season of nationals. They win NPDA 2 years in a row without this. They're very, very good at this point. UC Tyler wins 1 nationals. They're in finals 1 time. They don't even make finals of the other year, or the other half of nationals because of the weird F4K thing, which again I think they probably should have still advanced. And then they probably would have won nationals. I come back to Long Beach NAS, the year that UT Tyler wins. It has 216 entries, and if you combine both NPTEs and both NPDAs, Brennan and Tristan won. So of all 4 of them, it's not as many people as there were at that winter. Now again, 200 of those teams don't matter. They never do. Sure. There's never more than 10 at the absolute most really good teams. And I do think that this year there were these women teams were legit cracked.
Yeah,
they're legit very good. And I think last year a little bit lesser of an extent. Women were still very good then. Rice was solid. Tyler was solid. But I don't know if it's on the same level as what Sam and Steven are. I think the biggest problem is this. I have seen, now again, I've seen many more rounds of Brennan Tristan than I've seen of Sam and Steven, though I have seen, 10 rounds, Sam and Steven probably. I legitimately don't think I've ever seen Sam and Steven have a bad round. I cannot think of a single round where they were fumbling to like get through the MG or through the PMR, or where I was like, this is a really stupid strategy. There's just it's like any of those kinds of things. Like I have seen Brenna and Tristan have bad preps. I have seen Brenna and Tristan like have some challenges with filling time or like running out of things to say almost and whatnot. I think if there's a space where Brenna and Tristan win this debate for me, I think they'd smoke them on theory. I think that Steven was okay with theory. Sam didn't have to deal with a lot. And clearly it was a weakness for Sam because they lost on Kondo. Now, Brenna and Tristan aren't going to go for Kondo. That's the problem. They're not going to do it. They don't seem to do it when I beg them to. It's funny because I'd say the number one thing Brenna texts me during the season is, can you send me the Kondo stuff again? Can you send me the Kondo good and Kondo bad file again? I send it to her all the time. And it's so tough because how do you weigh a team that won 4 nationals, has 2 unbelievable seasons, has all of these accomplishments, and it is, for a lot, almost 10 years later, versus a team that just was unbeatable at that time and only lost on wacky bullshit, essentially, and has who I think, I love Brenna and Tristan. I think they're, I said Tristan, I think is the GOAT, accomplishment-wise and everything. I don't think Brenna and Tristan are better than Sam Quick. I don't. I really don't. Like, I don't think they're better debaters than Sam Quick was. I think they're better than Steven. I think both Brenna and Tristan might be better than Steven. But then I think about it again, and I'm like, I don't know if Brenna or Tristan Maving go 6-0 at that mile high. So I don't know. Where are you at, man? This is a tough one for me.
So I guess I'll start here. For me, it was actually not as hard for me to pick what I think is probably the better matchup for UT Tyler. I think UT Tyler in this debate is in a position where because Brenna and Tristan, we'll start with their 4 championships, undisputed, reigning, defending national champions. If they wanted to come back for 6, they could probably get 6. But I think that also speaks a little bit to the way that the MPTE this year, there's no Rice. That doesn't mean that I think that, they're going to lose to Rice, but also, what is it? The first elim of NPTE, Danny and Angie from Pacific take a ballot. I don't know that there's a world where Danny and Angie can even hang with right? And I think that's where I start looking at it, is it's not so much that I don't think that Brenna and Tristan can hang. It's the things that happen in debates that befuddle them, right? Like we were talking about this when they were reading Chaos Magic and Whitman read Magic Spec, right? And I thought that Whitman was going to do this in finals of the MPTE and read Alien Spec. Because the whole ask about, we got to protect us from aliens. Which aliens? Who are you? What aliens are you talking about? And it's covert. We don't know. I don't think it would really fly, but that's neither here nor there, right? I think I text you and I was like, why isn't the easy answer to this just that's exactly what they did during the Salem witch trials, right? Like every time women goes, what kind of magic are you? This is what they said to witches, and that's why they learned this mistake. When you said that. Right? And I was like, that to me, and it took me 3 minutes maybe hearing it going, why is this not the answer? And so the only reason I say that is
because Sam would have taken 10 seconds.
Sam would have taken 10 seconds and gone, we're done, and would have answered it. So that's where I think, again, it's not, and I think it's also a product of who Brenna and Tristan were forced to debate, right? Like if they were when they were forced to debate Oregon consistently practicing against them, they got so much better, right? If they were forced to debate Sam and Steven, I think much like Goku, to get you to give Robbie to give Robbie a shout out about Dragon Ball. But I really do think that them getting beat, they're gonna figure it out. But without an incentive to figure it out, right? And I don't mean beat in the sense of they lose, but it's a beating that even if they win, they're taking. Without that to push them, I don't think they come to Steve and Sam's level in terms of, and if it is theory, fair enough. If it is theory, I think you're right. But I also am cognizant of the fact that Steve and Sam are very good about staying away from theory as they need to. You talked about it, right? They lost 2 rounds to Kondo. 1, how many of the rounds came down to Kondo is my question. You would probably have the stats on that. And 2, that should speak to the way that I don't think probably a lot of them came down to Kondo. 1, because teams don't go for Kondo.
Yeah, no,
but 2, by the time they get to nationals, Steve and Sam are like, why would we give somebody this weakness?
Yeah.
Right. Like the biggest problem on the F word K is that Sam thought so little of the argument that when they asked him to stop cursing, I think I remember he was like, I don't give a fuck. Right. And that, like, that's where I think that, like, they lose to this argument because the ethos isn't there in the round. But even still, right, they were so good about not giving people an opportunity to beat them. And this is what you've heard me say this about Kondo. One of the reasons I don't think Kondo's a good strategic move in parlay is just because you give somebody an out, and you should give as few outs as possible. Stop providing win conditions out of the LO, right? Like the AF already has win conditions. Why would you give them another one? And so that's the part where I think UTT is better than Brennan and Tristan on that. But I don't think that it's a firm an inability to get there. I just don't think they've ever been pushed to that level.
All right, we're wrapping up, I promise, in the next 5 minutes. Here we are in the final round of time travel Nats, okay? SIU RS 2013 against UTT CH. Unfortunately, I think this one's a little anticlimactic. I have seen Josh and Zach hand Sam and Steven their ass. And we just said Josh and Mike would hand Josh and Zach their ass.
Yeah.
And when we do that litmus test of, okay, what if Josh Rivera or Mike Selk had to Maverick at Mile High? Do you think they would go undefeated and be top speaker? Yes, I do. I absolutely do. And again, the field, it's big the year Sam and Steven win. It's bigger the year that Mike and Josh win. And what's the weakness of UT Tyler? Oh, it's Kondo. I got some bad news for you. This is the best Kondo team of all time.
I also think that this is anticlimactic for the following reason as well. Josh not as well read on the criticism. Like, he's really good at it. Like, just he's efficient, and so don't get me wrong, he reads, but all of the criticisms that UT Tyler reads, Mike's ready for. Mike's been reading and wants to read. And so that was always the part where it made me laugh, is that everybody thinks about SIU as this team that debated straight up. Mike was ready to read the K in every round. And I think has like Lacan, has not just Nietzsche, but also has Deleuze and Guattari, has Bataille. Like, he's just ready for the entire spectrum of it. Wishes he could have been at Whitman sometimes, I think, in my mind. No, he loved what he did at SIU, but the freedom to read any argument that he wanted didn't exist, but he was ready to read them. So I don't think the lit base either is a good spot for you.
And the other thing that we didn't mention, or at least I forgot to mention during the SIU RS squared round or whatever, the other benefit that SIU RS had in that round is that it's Josh on his better speech. Like, it's Josh in the PMR, it's Mike in the MG. I think Mike's a better MG than Sam Cook. I think Mike's the best MG of all time, probably. I think PMR wise, Josh, if he's not the best, it's only because he's not the best because of Sam Cook. So you're telling me, like, I've got the best MG of all time and the best or second best PMR of all time. Yeah. A team that did win double nats. A team that did debate hyper-technical teams, K teams, that had tons of ethos. Sam couldn't swag out the same way against them. That could answer the cross-ex questions. Mike was great at answering cross-ex questions. I love Mike's answers in cross-ex, especially on K debate. And I think that as good as Sam and Steven are, and especially Sam is, I think Josh clearly had figured out how to beat Sam, at least by senior year. And I don't know why it would be significantly different this year when they were so supremely good.
Well, the last thing I would put to that as well, just look at the final round of the MPTE when they beat Whitman. Now, the insiders' take on this. So that year at the MPTE, there were 9 judges, right? I believe there were 9. Either way, the first 4 ballots, or the first 3 ballots, whatever it is, all come in for Whitman. And then every other ballot comes in for SIU. And I think that one of the key things is that Whitman team read D&G, they read theory, and then they read a dissad and a counterplan.
Yeah.
And I don't even think that Mike was phased. And I don't think he read Kondo in that debate.
He did read Kondo. They slowed
him. He did? Okay. So
they didn't go for Kondo though, yeah.
Yeah, they didn't go. But my point is, right, it's just like you're watching somebody who you could throw the toolbox, everything you had, and it didn't matter. And if you walked yourself through the debate, you came to it. Now it's a close round, like I said, but I don't think that Mike and the MG is phased by anything the UT Tyler's.
One of the things I didn't mention on the UT Tyler versus Brennan Tristan debate that I was thinking about is that Brennan and Tristan have a strength that also UT Tyler does, but that does not work in that debate, which is Brennan and Tristan murk teams who make mistakes. Like, if you make a mistake, you're marked. But Sam was that same way. Sam was against a lot of the better teams. The way he won was they said something stupid right before cross-checks, and if he was behind, he was able to come back. And in the other debates, he won because he was a front runner. He was just ahead. Like, they were ahead in all these debates. I don't think they're ahead in this debate, and I don't think they get any ammunition in cross-checks to beat them with. And I think maybe a Sam PMR can win this round. I don't think there's anything they can do on the negative.
I think their out is only if time of, like, let's say SIU is neg and the LOC for Mike is top heavy. There are outs in that world, but it's got to take up a strategic blunder that is not something they said, but just they weren't able to get there, not because they were spread out, but because they spent too much time. Like I said, it'd have to take a moment where Josh makes a bonehead decision that didn't end up mattering in that debate against Evan and Dan, but says, you know what, this is what I want my nationals to come down to, and I'm going to make the decision for both of us. And you just go, please don't be wrong.
All right, that's our bracket. At the end of the bracket, at the end of Time Travel Nats, the best team of all time was the 1 seed, SIU RS 2013, Mike Selk, Josh Rivera. Again, phenomenal teams. Just to be in the bracket means you had to be one of the best teams of all time. A fun exercise, went a little over 2.5 hours. Stop sharing my screen. Thank you so much, Steve. There was literally no other person on the planet that I could have done this with. I'm glad we finally got you on a Proteus video. I hear Jack crying in the background, but do you have any final words, final thoughts, anything you want to say to people? Tell your students to start listening to you instead of watching my videos, thoughts in general?
No, I mean, listening to you is like listening to me anyways, but also I appreciate you having me. I know it's a long time out of your day, but I thought this exercise was fun. I wish we could do it with the teams that didn't win Nats, but that's a much bigger bracket. So.
It would take forever. Okay, cool. Well, I will talk to you later, Steve. Thanks so much, folks. Proteus Debate with Titus Crew moving. Catch you later.